I presume you're here in order to learn of Magecraft. I'll have you know, there's no room for the weak-willed in this course, and despite your best efforts, the sorcery of our time is but a fraction of what it once was in the Age of Gods. Much of the craft is established through pedigree, and the culture of mages is riddled with deception and moral depravity. That said, if you insist, I shall do my best to educate you in this miserable, yet fascinating world.
In our previous lesson, I spoke of the structure of our universe on a macro level, covering how we are currently part of just a single world, a single timeline out of many that the universe at large maintains. It's important to know that other timelines exist, given that it's possible for us to interact with them to an extent. On the opposite end, it's just as important for us to realize the aspects of our own world that continue to evade us. Thus far, I've given lip service to locations such as the reverse side of the world, the wandering sea, and void space, without highlighting what they all have in common. As such, today's lesson will be on textures, the layers of reality that exist in tandem with the reality we typically interact with. Obviously, our Earth is a planet orbiting the Sun in the Milky Way galaxy. It is a physical, tangible location that we humans and other life forms travel across, explore, and reside upon. That's how we perceive our world. We have no choice but to do so, and yet it would be foolish to assume the world only consists of things we can reach, see, and touch as mortal beings. By now, you all have experience with reality marbles, for instance, which use tremendous amounts of mana to force one's mental landscape onto the world. Bounded fields also separate aspects of reality from each other. An entire location can be hidden away by a spell, and without prior knowledge or the ability to sense such things, you'd never know it existed. Well, on a much larger scale, our planet consists of textures, or layers of reality that wrap around the planet. Everything we humans recognize as real is only one of a handful of separate realities that all lay atop each other like layered carpets. This layer contains living things and the physical laws we abide by, but there was a time when such laws were far less strict. Of course, I'm referring to the Age of Gods. Divine spirits, born from human worship, aren't typically held down to the same physical laws that bind us. They used to roam the world where we could see and interact with them, but it's been stated to death by now that this is no longer the case. The Age of Gods came to an end as humanity embraced technology over faith. The gods and other phantasmal species didn't go extinct, however. Instead, they merely migrated to a texture below ours, one that we call the reverse side of the world. This left our texture to be defined by physical laws, but the reverse side became the new home for supernatural elements and beings. They all continue to exist, though not necessarily in the observable sense we're used to. The reverse side is also occasionally referred to as the inner sea of the planet. While not quite so literal, you can imagine the Earth as a bottom layer, enveloped by the reverse side, acting like its soul, and layered atop that, we have the human world where we all live. Mind you, these textures are not permanent. Just like the gods migrated from our layer to the reverse side, certain beings and powerful artifacts can create, alter, or even remove textures. To that end, the planet needs to maintain its textures, else they can be peeled away. Such would be the equivalent of the world's destruction, at least as far as we mortals are concerned. For instance, some may wish to resurrect the Age of Gods by discarding our layer, exposing the reverse side beneath it. To prevent this and other textural damage, Earth anchors its textures with the divine construct Rongominyad. In its true form, it is a pillar, or tower of light, that binds the planet's textures together. As the king who stood at the final moments of the Age of Gods, King Arthur was entrusted Rongominyad in the form of a lance, though it's worth noting the lance is merely a shadow of its main body. As a tower stitching together reality and illusion, it is often more metaphysical, such as the Root or Throne of Heroes. While there are other divine artifacts that serve to anchor our world's textures, Rongominyad is considered to be the most stable and significant. In a vague sense, the reverse side of the world can be described as the Earth that once was, the way things were before humanity existed. Considering that humans are a critical part of the gods and other phantasmal beings, however, it's more accurate to say that the reverse side is a safe haven where supernatural concepts gather after humanity had abandoned them. It's just as much a record of humanity's mythological past as it is the planet's. Considering the reverse side of the world doesn't follow our physics, it's not surprising that it also doesn't follow our same magecraft. Spells meant to affect humans, like the third magic, Heaven's Feel, don't apply to gods or phantasmal species. Generally speaking, humans can't interfere with the reverse side, let alone enter it, without a connection to the supernatural. It's difficult even for heroic spirits to traverse between the two textures, even with access to infinite attempts. When the Age of Gods ended, and phantasmal species migrated to the reverse side, some took longer in that journey than others. The British Isles, for instance, were one of the last places for the gods to vacate. As a result, the humans there were able to remain in contact with phantasmal beings for an extended period of time. During this era, the fairies, in particular, interacted with humans rather frequently, greatly influencing the legends surrounding King Arthur. Perhaps the most obvious is Vivian, the Lady of the Lake, who gave Artoria Pendragon Excalibur, the divine construct made by the fairies. The highest class of fairies are referred to as the Great Fathers and Great Mothers, and Vivian's counterpart, Morgan Le Fay, also qualifies as a Great Mother. Unlike her sister Artoria, who was born with the essence of the Red Dragon, Morgan was born as the spawn of Britain itself. Despite being a fairy, Morgan was raised as a human, destined to inherit the throne of her father Uther, if not for Artoria's conception. The Great Mother Vivian raised Lancelot as a foster parent, and Arthur's kingdom of Camelot was constructed with the aid of fairies. Other legends also speak to the lingering presence of fairies, such as one who stole 7 years of youth from the Celtic hero Finn McCool. The wandering king Mandricardo also made an oath to the fairies that he would one day obtain the famed sword Durendal. Perhaps Arthur's greatest tie to the fairies comes from Avalon, the king's promised utopia. It is a paradise located at the same coordinates as Britain, but existing exclusively in the reverse side of the world. Derived from the Greek apple of immortality, Avalon serves as a place for the king to enjoy an eternal afterlife. Despite being the product of human history, it is cut off from the planet's surface, unaffected by the ever-changing state of our texture. Instead, Avalon enjoys spring sunshine, summer smells, autumn nights, and winter stars. It is adorned with colorful flowers blooming across gentle hills. With no sign of civilization, it is a point where the land meets the sky in equal measure, surrounded by a distant forest. Nature flourishes, with both wildlife and ethereal fairies occupying the woods and waters. Beyond the forest are barren lands akin to Britain, where the fairies have settled after finally vacating the world's surface. It is said that ordinary humans cannot set foot in Avalon, not without bursting from its intense concentration of mana. That said, Artoria's mage Merlin found himself fleeing to Avalon after angering Vivian. There, he became trapped in a tall tower in Avalon, unable to die until the world's end. Artoria herself, after terminating her contract with the Counterforce, was able to die as a human. Escorted by the fairies, she resided in Avalon, patiently waiting for her beloved Shiro to join her. Reaching Avalon, let alone the reverse side, is an extremely difficult accomplishment. Mere mortals cannot hope to do so, but as we know, Shiro transcended humanity by becoming a heroic spirit. Thus, after endlessly pursuing her, Shiro was ultimately able to reunite with the King of Knights. The odds are very close to zero, but not impossible, allowing other heroic spirits to access the reverse side after countless attempts from the Throne of Heroes. Similar to Shiro, Jeanne d'Arc also found her way to the reverse side of the world to reunite with her lover, Sieg. As remarkable as this is, there is, surprisingly, a more tangible way of nearing the reverse side from our lair. This is because, at the end of the Age of Gods, a creature called the Dragon of Albion initially refused to migrate. Instead, it waited until the Age of Man had arrived before making its journey. it dug deep beneath the ground, but died before reaching the reverse side, leaving behind a deep abyss where parts of its body fused with the earth. This cavern became known as the spiritual tomb of Albion, the very foundation upon which the clock tower was built. I'd mentioned this tomb before, but never in its relationship to the reverse side. As one travels deeper into the tomb, the more remnants from the Age of Gods can be found, including certain phantasmal species and mystical resources. The Mages Association even has its own force, the Secret Autopsy Division, which mines the tomb for said resources. Mind you, the tomb is not a linear path, but more of an underground labyrinth, which can be entered from a scarce few entrances throughout the world. While the Clock Tower's management department has tried to control entrances to the tomb, others have still made their way inside. Hoping to claim the tomb's secrets for themselves, these grave robbers often wind up lost or disappearing into the abyss. While not a grave robber himself, Kuro Arashino earned his nickname Dr. Heartless after falling from the tomb into the world of fairies and having his heart stolen by them. In an effort to replicate the wild hunt, Trevor Pelham Codrington opened a gate to the fairy realm, leading to his son Will's falling in love with a fairy and closing the gate behind him to be with her. The reverse side of the world is indeed mysterious, but we also have plenty to consider in regard to our own texture. After all, I said that powerful beings can actually manipulate textures to their will. Chief among them are the true ancestors. As nature spirits, they are effectively the planet's sense of touch, and with that comes some remarkable abilities. One such ability is the Marble Phantasm, which allows them to shape reality itself, bypassing the laws of physics as we understand them. Perhaps even more impressive is the system known as Event Storage, an ability that allows true ancestors to both store and requisition the planet's textures. One could certainly argue that such abilities are too powerful to be given to beings who, like humans, can act based on emotion. The mages of the Wandering Sea found a way to hide their own headquarters within an isolated texture called the Moving Tomb. In appearance, it is a mobile mountain range peeking out from a torrential ocean. Because the Wandering Sea is not technically a part of our texture, it was immune when the mysterious alien god bleached the earth. This bleaching of the land can be considered a form of rewriting the world's outer texture, allowing for various lost belts to be affixed to the planet's surface. According to Scandinavian mythology, the Age of Gods came to an end in the year 1000 BC with Ragnarok. Rather than the Norse gods migrating to the reverse side, they were burned away, leaving humanity to prosper in their absence. In a rather strange event, the mischievous goddess Ishtar once made use of a holy grail to place a texture of Venus across the land of Connacht in order to recreate her bull of heaven, Gugulana. The last thing I wish to bring up is another way through which to escape the planet's textures, that being void space. Think of it as a sea of imaginary numbers that exists independent from the world's reality. I bring it up because mages have actually used void space in their various pursuits. For instance, the Chaldea Security Organization uses its shadow border to zero sail, essentially leaving the planet's texture to traverse void space. It is a risky procedure, but it has enabled them to enter and exit lost belts, which are normally isolated within their respective storm walls. It seems that not even the might of gods can harm Chaldea while taking refuge in void space. In addition, the mage Trisha Fellows once utilized void space to both hide and preserve her decapitated head, in turn keeping her unique mystic eyes out of the clutches of evil. Getia's Temple of Time existed within void space, allowing it to preside over the 7 singularities scattered across history. And also, before being summoned by Kingu, the beast of humanity Tiamat was sealed within void space. In summation, the world as we know it is only one of different textures that envelop the earth like layers of fabric. The texture we live in is tied to all our physical laws, home to the age of man. But beneath us is a layer of reality called the reverse side of the world, which is occupied by the various divine and phantasmal beings that left us after the Age of Gods. Certain artifacts, namely Rungominiad, serve to tether these textures to the planet so that the Age of Gods is not forcefully brought back. Even without that threat, our own texture is still susceptible to being manipulated or entirely overwritten, making it wise for us to consider hiding within other textures, or even the void space that transcends our reality altogether. Regarding our next lesson, I would like to once again invite you all to propose your own topics for the curriculum. I must say, we have come far since this class began, and I would be delighted to accommodate your interests. In our previous lesson, I spoke of textures, the very layers of reality that envelop our planet, and how artifacts like Rongominiad serve to bind these textures together. I then turned to you for suggestions on future lessons. With a list of topics to work on, I have decided to dedicate today's lesson to witchcraft and the various witches who practice it. To a non-mage, the concepts of wizards and witches is readily established through culture. Wise men with wooden staffs and wicked old women stirring up cursed cauldrons. These terms are not quite so straightforward to an actual mage, however. I've already mentioned that a wizard, for instance, is just another way to refer to a Spiritron hacker. This includes mages who participate in the Mooncell Holy Grail Wars. Witches, however, have a more complicated identity and are not simply a term for female mages. To start out, let us differentiate between witchcraft and witches, which are actually separate concepts. Witchcraft as a whole refers vaguely to a number of thaumaturgical spells and techniques that one might also call black magic. It does include curses, as well as many spells that require sacrifice. Some may consider witchcraft to be a more negative aspect of black magic, though I must admit that compared to the devilish methods of François Prelati and Gilles de Rais, witchcraft can be fairly tame. For an idea of what witchcraft actually looks like, I find it is best to look at examples. The following are ordinary human mages that practice witchcraft, but are not themselves witches. Haduri Borzak is a young woman who considers witchcraft an art that requires sacrifice, whether it come externally or from the user itself. Despite this, she has a strong moral compass, hesitating to so much as speak the word kill aloud. She refuses to sacrifice others, especially animals, so her witchcraft instead uses her own flesh and blood. Due to her reluctance for violence, her spells are actually best used for deflecting curses rather than conjuring them. Ayaka Sajo is a mage who learned black magic from her father Hiroki. Like Haruri, Ayaka's witchcraft requires sacrifices, this time from animals specifically. Compared to her father, Ayaka is rather unskilled in this practice, and actually finds more success in a different field. When she does use witchcraft, however, it manifests in the form of black crow feathers that she can fire like darts at her enemies. The mage Misaya Reirokan also learned black magic from her father, which she uses in conjunction with rune magecraft and summoning. It shows how many of these practices tend to bleed into each other. Unique spells emerge whenever mages of different backgrounds approach the same general concept. This can be seen in the Sakagami family of mages. Their witchcraft involves calling down the gods with a bronze bell linked to their ode. The practice of witchcraft often does share a cultural connection to deception, sacrifice, poisons, potions, and curses. Thus, people can find themselves falsely called witches regardless of their practice or heritage, earning the title of witch often out of intimidation. Such is the case for the mage Aoko Aozaki. Many view her as the infamous Witch of Destruction, but while she trained under a witch as a teenager, she herself is not actually one of them. The concept also applies to Jeanne d'Arc Alter, who, after being conjured by a depraved Gilles de Rais, became known as the Dragon Witch, or Witch of Vengeance, despite not even being a conventional mage. That said, what exactly is a witch then? While witches do indeed practice witchcraft, what truly defines them is that they're an entirely separate race of supernatural beings. Indeed, witches are not the same as ordinary humans. They're an ancient race involved in establishing the very first true magic. In fact, the involvement of witches is one of the few things we actually know about the first magic, beyond how it supposedly generates ether clumps. Initially, witches had a healthy relationship with the Mages Association. The witch Yumina is responsible for founding the Department of Botany, which is also named after them. Since witchcraft often entails the creation of potions, the Department of Botany gained success in the Clock Tower by selling pharmaceuticals, the most popular being anti-aging medicine. Just like the gods, witches were in their prime during past eras. Morgan, sister of Artoria Pendragon and ruler of Fairy Britain, could be considered one of the most powerful witches. She established and maintains her dominion over the British Lost Belt through a ritual called Water Mirror, or Infinity Mirror. It's a type of transference magecraft that turns the sky into still water before unleashing a bolt of lightning that strikes her targets and sends them back in time. Such a feat is certainly on par with true magic, requiring a colossal amount of mana generated by the swirling storm clouds that can persist for days or even weeks. It's akin to a nuclear reactor for magical energy, which becomes ever more intimidating when you consider that it can be used to capture calamities for additional mana. Ultimately, Morgan intends to use this energy as a curse to dominate not just the world of fairies, but also the world of proper human history. In that endeavor, Morgan can bestow her infinity mirrors to her subjects. In this case, the fairy knight Tristan, more properly called the witch Bavanshi. Traditionally a vampiric ghoul of the Scottish Highlands, the Bavanshi serving Morgan is a witch split between polarizing images. On one end, she is a hard-working girl loved by her mother, but on the other, she is a haughty princess who sees her future kingdom as a toy to corrupt. She possesses a skill called Grey Malkin, named after a witch's iconic feline companion. Her noble phantasm is Fetch Fail Not, keening of painful fantasy. Based on the idea of a Scottish doppelganger, she creates a body double of her enemy from their flesh. Killing this double will curse the original to death. It is a dangerous technique that rots her soul with each use. A more iconic witch is Circe, the queen of witches. In Greek mythology, she was a worshipper of Hecate, goddess of witchcraft and necromancy. By trade, Circe was talented in herbalism, making potions strong enough to affect even heroic spirits. On her island of Aea, she would lure her victims in with poisoned feasts and use polymorphing or shapeshifting to turn them into animals, namely pigs. She also reigns over Scylla, the nymph she cursed into becoming a multi-headed sea monster. While Circe wears her status as a witch with pride, being associated with witches can be absolutely tragic. Such is the case for Circe's nephew Medea. The two of them worshipped Hecate together, and for 6 months, Medea was taught magecraft by her aunt in order to take over as a shrine priestess in her land of Colchis. Biologically speaking, she was not a witch, nor did she intend to use her witchcraft to bring harm to others. However, fate demanded she do just that when Jason and his Argonauts came to Colchis looking for the Golden Fleece. Under a spell from the goddess Aphrodite, Medea was forced to aid Jason by butchering her own family. The Argonauts looked upon her with disdain, branding her a witch out of fear. Even Jason, the man she was forced to love, cast her aside after having her perform all manner of wicked deeds. To her, ironically, there is no curse more sorrowful than being condemned as a witch. Sadly, hatred for witches would only continue to swell with the end of the Age of Gods. Not only were witches hanged or burned alive at the stake, their very existence faded as humanity became independent from mystery. One of two things happened to witches during this transition. The vast majority went away, returning to the earth or rejoining Eumena. Some of them miraculously returned to the past, though I must admit their means are beyond me. More tragically, the minority of witches chose to integrate with human society and are unfairly treated as fallen witches, unsightly rejects who abandoned the power they once held. This is because falling in love with humans dilutes a witch's blood and presumably rots their soul. Though it was essentially a choice between living on with humans or dying out as pure witches, many mages, including higher-ups at the association, believe all witches should have perished with dignity. It's ironic, given humanity's own struggle to remain talented in a craft that is slowly but surely fading away. One of these troubled witches is Alice Kuonji, who is thought to be Yumina's descendant. She inherited her mage abilities from her mother Meinster, the previous generation's witch. Meinster reluctantly married into the Kuonji family after falling in love with their eldest son. I say she was reluctant not out of passion, but out of fear that their child would also inevitably be born a witch. Given the stigma put on witches, this would only bring sorrow to whatever family they made for themselves. Regardless, the two married and had their daughter Alice. Sure enough, their family struggled. Alice's mother died shortly after her birth. While her father loved her dearly, he too passed away after several years of criticism from other mages. Both parents left Alice alone in the mansion they had purchased, where she continued to pursue a life of witchcraft. Thanks to a favorable association with the Aozaki family, Alice is able to live with and tutor her friend Aoko. Unlike Aoko, who ages as a normal human, Alice is deemed as a lady of eternity who cannot. Her body matured at the age of 16 when she perfected her craft. While she and her abilities are considered strong, she is ultimately frail, considering she is bound to vanish as the world modernizes. Alice's witchcraft is special in that it utilizes various familiars made famous through fairy tales. It is a rare system called Ploy Kickshaw that has been passed down for over 1,000 years. She brags of having 108 familiars, or ploys, though in truth she only has about 30, 20 of which she inherited from her ancestors, and 10 she created by herself. Among them are the Great Three, ploys inherited by the very first generation. Unlike traditional weaponry, ploys are beings of fantasy and illusion that do not follow the laws of physics, making them superior to most modern weapons. They can only be affected by concepts that also exist within fairy tales, as all other things evaporate on touch. One of the privileged mages of Chaldea's Team A, Beryl Gut, comes from an ancient family line. His mother was a witch who raised him in the forest, secluded from civilization. She taught him a style of witchcraft tailored to assassination and torture that manipulates life itself as a main ingredient. Specifically, Beryl can shapeshift into other creatures after eating them. Before joining Chaldea, he naturally studied in the Department of Botany. As a crypter of the British Lost Belt, he was actually the one who taught Bavanshi her noble phantasm. The last case I wish to speak of is April, a witch who became as such through extraordinary means. She had the power to turn her lies into reality, making those around her afraid and aggressive. While she always told the truth, the people condemned her to torture and burning at the stake. There, she told her one and only lie. "I don't want to die, I'm a witch." It was especially ironic. This phrase being a lie revealed her genuine wish for death, but saying she was a witch made her lie true, such that she could not die, not even after a witch hunter sliced her neck, gouged her chest, stole her heart, locked her heart into a box, and burned it to ashes with holy oil. To avoid further conflict, she locks herself in her room, only ever opening the door on April 1st out of loneliness. I believe it is safe to say her circumstances are not at all conventional. In summation, witches and witchcraft are related, but not exclusively connected. Witchcraft is an ancient form of black magecraft, involving cursed spells that require sacrifice. Many myths surrounding witchcraft hold an element of truth, such as boiling potions in cauldrons, having cats as familiars, and shape-shifting. Clearly, however, the shape of witchcraft varies drastically between different mages. We often call people witches, sometimes out of spite or intimidation, but in truth, witches are a supernatural race that exists similar to gods. With the coming of the modern era, witches could only survive by integrating and reproducing with humans. As if their reputation weren't bad enough, this process had them estranged from the Mages Association, despite still possessing great magical talent. My heart goes out to these women who endure such a harsh stigma. It is truly one of the world's greatest tragedies. In their honor, I wish to dedicate our next lesson exclusively to Alice Kuonji and her many ploys. Covering each and every one of them should prove to hopefully redeem the way we view witches and witchcraft on a larger scale. In our previous lesson, I spoke of witches, witchcraft, and the difference between them. Back then, I mentioned a rather unique witch, Alice Kuonji, but hardly had the time to truly delve into her life and abilities. Her Ploy Kickshaw alone happens to be enough for us to dedicate an entire lesson to. As I mentioned before, Alice is the current generation's witch of her family. Her mother, Meinster, fell in love with the eldest son of the Kuonjis. Despite their romance, Meinster feared bearing the Kuonji heir a child, knowing full well it would be a witchly daughter like herself, fated to inherit all the blood and stigmas witches are burdened with. Even worse, she feared a prophetic notion that falling in love will only bring tragedy. Regardless, the two married and had Alice, naming her after Alice in Wonderland. Just as expected, misfortune struck the family. Meinster died shortly after Alice's birth. Alice's father cared for her dearly for several years, enduring harsh criticism from his peers before also dying. This left Alice all alone in the lavish yet eerie mansion her parents had bought in Japan. Choosing to follow her mother's legacy, Alice dutifully follows the path of a witch, though she didn't have much choice to begin with. After all, she was a witch, one who after a certain age would stop growing, an eternal flower, delicate and dangerous. Alice has a pale complexion and cold demeanor. The school she attends, the prestigious Rayan Girls Academy, has her wearing a uniform akin to a nun's habit. She lives in the Kuonji mansion with Aoko Aozaki, having been roommates for 2 years. Despite her reserved nature, Alice can show moments of warmth and vulnerability around Aoko. Witches being of a different ilk than humanity says nothing of humans and witches being able to get along after all. The two are friends, but ultimately their relationship is one of instructor and apprentice. Alice teaches Magecraft to Aoko. Put bluntly, it's an exercise in patience. This arrangement came as the result of the Kuonji's connection to the Aozaki family. There's a tinge of irony to this relationship, however. While the two would get along as roommates, they were bound to conflict with one another under the right conditions. In a single moment, all of their friendly banter can dissipate in the face of a fundamental disagreement over human values. These details may seem extraneous, but given Alice is one of the few surviving witches for us to learn from, I feel it is best to understand not just her abilities, but also her current state of living. That said, let's move on to the heart of this lesson, Alice's remarkable witchcraft. Her left eye is a mystic eye of enchantment she can use to bind her targets. Her system of magecraft is called Yumina, based on the founder of the Department of Botany. This implies that Alice is actually a descendant of Yumina. Practically speaking, this means Alice specializes in putting up barriers, invoking curses, and even levitation. While she's considered extremely talented, it's worth noting that she isn't suited for direct confrontation. While mages often train their bodies for close combat or fire off magic bullets, Alice does neither. Instead, her witchcraft relies almost exclusively on familiars. To conjure these familiars, Alice uses a system called Ploy Kickshaw that summons familiars based on fantasy and fairy tales. They are called ploys, created by giving form to classic and iconic stories and nursery rhymes. In total, Alice has about 30 ploys, 20 of which she inherited from her ancestors, and 10 she made herself. They have various uses, and some definitely stand out more than others. Among them are ploys called the Great Three, powerful familiars made by the very first generation of witches. Relying on familiars may seem like a weakness, but there are tremendous benefits that come with it. While modern weaponry can certainly suppress modern mages, Alice's ploys don't function on the same level of reasoning, and as such are immune to guns and explosives. You need to fight mystery with mystery, sometimes even targeting a ploy's only weakness ingrained upon the story they derive from. Overall, they are splendid for combat, but that's not to say all of her ploys take an offensive role. One of Alice's more humble ploys is the Song of the Sixpences, Jack in the Box, Singing Chocolates. It is a box containing 24 bird familiars stored in the shape of chocolates. These birds monitor Alice's home, Misaki Town, on her behalf, but are fundamentally weak familiars that can be slain easily, some of which actually can run into phone poles and die. Shutting the box containing them turns the birds immediately back into chocolates, which can be melted into wounds as first aid, because they contain magical energy. Even though they can be replenished, it seems Aoko eats them to casually boost herself when practicing Magecraft. Essentially, the number she eats represents the number of failed attempts she's made at a given spell. A separate bird ploy of Alice's is Robin, or Lost Robin Rondo. Based on the Cock Robin nursery rhyme, this familiar is a humble scout with no ability for combat. It is unassuming, which helps it observe without causing concern. It is debatably the weakest of her ploys, but she keeps it around for companionship. Oftentimes, it can be quite bothersome, speaking out of line and having a rather forward temperament. To further monitor the town, Alice uses the second ticket, Mirror of Napping. It was made from the combined efforts of Alice's mother and Toko Aozaki, refurbishing an enchanted mirror. Based on Alice Through the Looking Glass, it contains a separate world, but can be used to reflect parts of the city and mansion like a surveillance camera. It also excels at creating bounded fields. By reflecting the town as a chessboard, Alice can place another ploy named Nameless Forest at various locations. It deters intruders through suggestion, forcing them to think they have no business in that area. The mirror's power emanates fog, which can build up on the mansion's windows. Much worse, though, the mirror can sometimes uncontrollably create portals to its inner world throughout the mansion. It is unpredictable, but undeniably useful. For combat, Alice can rely on Tweedledee and Tweedledum, a pair of Victorian piglets with twisted personalities. They excel at speeding through forests and deterring foes by transforming themselves into scissored jaws. The Tweedles' bites are like staples, trapping victims with a conceptual curse and leaving them vulnerable to further attack. Arguably, one of Alice's most important ploys is Diddle Diddle, Banquet of the Night. Through a feat nearly on par with true magic, Alice can draw out and drop Diddle Diddle into the earth. As it sinks in like falling into water, it deepens the night, allowing Alice to use more powerful ploys. In that regard, it is an amplifier for her other ploys, but even on its own it can be used to attack foes with summoned dining utensils. It is quite versatile. For a more serious offense, however, Alice utilizes one of her great 3 ploys, Thames Troll, Giant of the Bridge. It is a golem that forms its body from the environment. As its name implies, the golem requires a nearby river to be summoned, but so long as that condition is met, the troll is incredibly deadly. It has 4 stages, each stronger than the last depending on what its body is made from. This progresses from wood to stone, metal, and gold or silver. Alice, being out of touch with modern civilization, is unable to manifest the latter 2 stages. Given no other witch exists who can, the troll's true power remains capped. Even so, if you hear Alice chanting London Bridges, your fate is likely already sealed. Another of her great 3 is Flat Snark, Oil of the Moon. Contained within a deceptive green vial is a nightmarish being called a Crown Phantasm. Created from the fat of a nomadic god, this being can be unleashed to create a rather chaotic bounded field. Within, objects from reality are transformed into living creatures from fantasy. When Alice uses Flat Snark within an abandoned amusement park, for instance, it transforms the rundown facility into a hellish carnival of living mascots, bread people, dragon roller coasters, and carnivorous clowns. Once summoned, the Snark's main form begins to grow and manifest from the fog of mana emanating throughout the barrier. When it emerges, it can attack with icebergs and spears of moonlight. Given the Great 3 were developed over 1,000 years ago, it is believed that Flat Snark may be a product of the first magic, though further details are vague at best. The legend of the Snark centers around trying in futility to hunt what is unreachable and unknown. As such, it is possible to defeat Flat Snark if its true form can be found and destroyed. Sure enough, that's exactly what Aoko did when trapped within its boundary. As if Flat Snark weren't dangerous enough, Alice has another ploy called Scratch Dumpty, a magical time bomb in the shape of an egg. By setting both a target and time limit, Alice can curse one of her enemies with the threat of an unavoidable curse. Once a target is chosen, Scratch Dumpty will hover over them and await detonation. If the time limit runs out, it will explode. But perhaps even more dangerous is that it will fall and detonate should its target fail to maintain eye contact. The final of Alice's great 3 ploys is Wandersnatch, Rosehound. It refers to a pack of ferocious monsters hidden within dense fog. They emerge with their sharp fangs before ravaging an area and devouring their prey. After the fog lifts, only bloodstains and scarred scenery remain. It is obviously one of her strongest ploys, but it seems these hounds come with the cost of a solid feeding from time to time. Thus, unleashing them isn't a matter of if, but when. To wrap this exposé off, let's visit something lighter. Sweetheart's Wishing Egg is actually a pudding in the shape of an egg. It has the ability to take the duplicate form of whomever eats it. The eater becomes trapped inside the egg, and Sweethearts takes a human form in the appearance of its victim. Not even Sweethearts itself realizes it's an imposter at that point. Needless to say, such a ploy is bound to cause chaos and mischief. Of course, Alice Kuonji has more ploys than what we've been able to cover here today. In truth, we have yet to witness any more of them, which finally brings an end to our coverage on witchcraft. In summation, Alice is regarded as the last witch, the current witch of the Meinster line. She appears human like any one of us, but has traits that clearly set her apart. She's a talented mage, able to train Aoko quite well in the span of 2 years. That said, when it comes to combat, she mainly relies on her Ploy Kickshaw, an ensemble of fantastical familiars that pretty much only she and her lineage can ever hope to utilize. For our next lesson, I will speak of another kind of magecraft that is usually out of our reach, unless you interact with another world, that is. I'm referring, of course, to Ainsworth Magecraft and their ability to harness heroic spirits in the form of class cards. In our previous lesson, I covered the unique witchcraft of Alice Kuonji, that being Ploy Kickshaw. It's not something you see every day, even when mages are concerned. Following in that vein, I'd like to cover another form of magecraft we might consider exclusive or uncommon. Thus, today's lesson is dedicated to Ainsworth Magecraft, including their use of class cards. The Ainsworth are a family of unaffiliated magi who live in the Fuyuki city of a separate parallel world. By now, hearing of such outrageous concepts should be normal. What we know of Fuyuki in our world does not necessarily apply to others. For the Ainsworths, however, they've been a famous part of their world for over 1,000 years. One would not be off base to consider them their world's equivalent of the Ainsburns. They even create their equivalent of homunculi. In this case, dolls. We'll come back to that, though. Much like the Ainsburns, the Ainsworths had a grandiose aspiration they could only solve with the Holy Grail. In their own way, they sought a means of saving humanity and worked to develop the Holy Grail alongside 2 other mage families, one of them being their world's version of the mottos. This begs the question, what did humanity need to be saved from? Well, even though mana depletion is something almost all worlds struggle with, the Ainsworth family had to contend with a more rapid decline they called degradation. Its effects could be seen through severe weather abnormalities. Japan, for instance, would have snowy summers. This rapid climate change killed off most plant life, killing off the animals that grazed upon them. The humans of this world are no exception. Earth has developed dry spots where all mana has been completely depleted, and in those spots can be found mysterious particles that are poisonous to humans. It is as if said particles are wiping the planet clean for a new age. Within no more than 10 generations, all humans are expected to perish. Science has certainly helped slow this process, but it alone is insufficient. Hoping to avoid this fate, the Ainsworths believe the Holy Grail can be used to make humanity compatible with the particles. If you recall my lesson on Ultimate Ones, this may feel very reminiscent of beings such as A-rays and liners. The Ainsburn family from our world constructed the Greater Grail as a massive spell. It came about from having Ainsburn homunculi merged with a complex spell located inside the Ten no Sakazuki. The Ainsworth family uses these very same caverns, or their version of them anyway, to construct a similar spell. At its core, however, is not a homunculus, but an unfortunate girl from the Sakatsuki, an ancient and gifted family. Sakatsuki children were revered as children of God, possessing divine authority until age 6. Such divinity was so strong that Sakatsuki children could grant wishes, much like the stored mana in a Lesser Grail. As such, the Ainsworth used these children as the core component of their Holy Grail. As wishmakers from birth, the Sakatsuki could be used to gather mana from a completed grail to wish for the Ainsworth ambition to become reality. Despite this, the first 3 Ainsworth Holy Grail Wars mysteriously ended in failure. During the 4th Holy Grail War, the Ainsworth head, Darius, unleashed a black shadow upon Fuyuki, destroying much of the city and its people. The shadow consumed all members of the Sakatsuki family, except for one child named Miyu. She responded to the people's cries and granted their wishes by quelling the darkness. In the aftermath, Miyu was taken under the care of Kiritsugu Emiya, who also hoped to use her power to save the world. His son Shiro, however, refused to treat Miyu as a tool, allowing her to grow up to the age of 10. In theory, Miyu should have lost her power as a child of God, but with the right ritual, these powers can still be triggered. Thus, the Ainsworth family, continuing under its heir Julian, kidnapped Miyu to use as the Greater Grail for a 5th Holy Grail War. Shiro would not let this slide, and participated in the war to save her. He successfully defeated all other masters, and used his wish to make Miyu happy. Miyu, in turn, wished to become his real sibling. To avoid the Ainsworth's pursuit, Miyu was sent to another world, but this escape only delayed the inevitable and allowed the Ainsworth's class card system to function in that other world. Thus, Julian pursues Miyu, hoping to convince her to grant his wish at the cost of her life. It's worth noting that, while the Ainsworth openly declare the Grail Wars an attempt to save humanity from degradation, they have actually been manipulated by their former leader Darius into pursuing a somewhat different goal. In his youth 1,000 years prior, Darius studied alchemy and came upon the discovery of Pandora, a doll of mud birthed by the Greek Olympians to preside over Pandora's box. The box, an ominous black cube, contains despair and misfortune, a manifestation of Earth's failed possibilities. After the box endured long after the Age of Gods came to an end, however, it began to develop possibilities beyond anything human history could fathom. Sadly, during that time, Pandora had lost the ability to open the box herself, and until it opens, she is unable to die. Darius sympathizes with Pandora, who is killed and tormented whenever people discover she isn't human. He wanted to help her be free from immortality, and by opening the box, he believed his dying world would be reborn as a new possibility that not even the Root could oversee. In that endeavor, Darius uses a special form of displacement magecraft. Also known as Flash Air, displacement is a family of spells that transform or otherwise shapeshift matter. Its foundation lies within alchemy and the idea of turning one thing into another. From water into wine, or a spoon into a fork, for instance. Darius's displacement works in a broader sense, allowing him to displace his own soul and survive for thousands of years by appearing within his descendants. We've seen cases like this before, such as Zoken Mato, but it inevitably involves the soul in question degrading over time. Darius stores his soul within Pandora's box itself, and since the world contained within transcends the rules of our world, he has avoided the problem of his soul's corruption. The same magecraft is used to an impressive extent, as Darius changes the shape and size of Pandora's box at will. His original body has long since perished, but whenever necessary, he can take control of his descendants, and currently uses Julian as his host. Pandora also goes by many names and takes various forms over the years, with her current being a little girl named Erica. This craft extends into the Ainsworth's use of dolls. Like automata, or puppets, dolls are artificial humanoid forms. Using displacement, Darius can transfer other people's souls into these doll bodies as a form of life extension. Many of the current Ainsworth family members are in fact dolls, hosting previous members that have otherwise perished. These dolls are not perfectly crafted, however, and so irregularities emerge from each of them. For example, Angelica lacks the majority of her former emotions. Often, she can only imitate human feelings. Beatrice Flowerchild, on the other hand, can no longer remember her childhood and is irrationally obsessed with her love for Julian. These mental deficiencies or obsessions are quite common for Ainsworth dolls. Darius himself suffers from a similar imperfection, in that every time he displaces himself, he loses sight of why he wanted to open Pandora's box in the first place. It seems the Ainsworth goal of saving their dying world is no longer as noble as it once was, justifying Miu and her friends when they decide to oppose it. Even Julian, who is being manipulated by his elder, doesn't necessarily want to open Pandora's box. While Pandora desperately wishes to die, he wishes for her to find genuine happiness. He refuses to let her die in a state of despair. Julian believes opening Pandora's box will only shower their world in corrupt mud. Pandora couldn't possibly rest assured with the world in that state, so his aim is to both open and destroy the box, letting her finally die with hope for the future. He makes an attempt to obliterate Pandora's box, and it nearly costs him his life, and from his remains, Darius fully reincarnates. The mud that pours from the box doesn't concern Darius. He only wants to witness the birth of a new world from inside of it. Thus, to protect the people of his world, it appears Darius must be defeated. The methods through which Miu, her allies, and the Ainsworths fight are the class cards. Why bother summoning a heroic spirit when you can become one? This is the fundamental thought process behind class cards, though of course it's never quite that simple. As you know, heroic spirits are manifestations of heroes long deceased. When summoned, they share the same ego they were known for, allowing for masters and servants to feud or otherwise disagree. Class cards allow a master to use a hero's power without having to confront their will. These cards are created by first passing heroic spirits through Pandora's box, suppressing their egos, and storing their abilities within cards that can be invoked in various ways. Most commonly, class cards are used to temporarily manifest a servant's noble phantasm through a command called Include, Limit, Expand. This can be performed by multiple users multiple times through the command Parallel Include. More powerful, however, is Install, Phantom Summon, a command that lets the user install a card directly into their body. This not only gives a master access to a servant's noble phantasm, but also their appearance and skills. In another sense, it is as though the user is being overwritten by the servant they install, merging the two of them into one. Because class cards are physical objects, they can be lost or left on the ground. When unattended, these cards can absorb mana from their surroundings, and with enough, they occasionally manifest the spirit inside in a blackened state. Such servants possess no reason, and only fight on instinct within a mirror world generated around them. This means that civilians are generally safe from blackened servants, and only mages hoping to retrieve the cards have to encounter them. There's an interesting dynamic regarding class cards and their strength. Suppressing a servant's ego is possible, but not inherently ideal. When their weapons and skills are used without consent, they are far weaker than if the servant and master are of like mind. Shiro, for instance, when installing the card for heroic spirit Emiya, is especially powerful. Darius is not a mage who can be defeated so easily, however. With his displacement, he can grasp and remove class cards from people even when they're installed. Having full control of his host, he demonstrates monstrous strength that no other Ainsworth mage could hope to achieve in a single lifetime. Quite uniquely, as a being living for thousands of years, he takes advantage of that history to embellish himself as a legendary figure. Using Miu's blood, Darius carves his life onto large tablets, chronicling himself with the hope of ascending beyond his human form. In creating his own story, he defies the Akashic records stored within the root, exploring entirely new possibilities to discover unknown heroic spirits. Their noble phantasms are so rare that not even King Gilgamesh is aware of them, when he should otherwise have the prototypes of all legendary weapons. When we consider that divergent worlds are often pruned or reach some form of inevitable destruction, it's hard to say that Darius's plan is ill-conceived. By allowing his own world to drown in mud, he can birth an entirely new history, one that he hopes will exceed the current history. This becomes an issue that surpasses what is considered right or wrong. At the very least, the planet itself is weary, sending a manifestation of Gaia's lingering will in the form of Tanaka, an absent-minded teenager with a resilient body. She most certainly plans to continue opposing Darius by placing her hopes on Ilya, and I can't exactly fault her for that either. Regardless, I find it fascinating how the Ainsworth family's magecraft is built upon harnessing Pandora's power. Darius is quite formidable, with ambition rivaling that of mages striving to reach the root. In summation, Ainsworth Magecraft isn't exactly something the family can call its own. The family legacy began with Darius discovering Pandora and catering his existing displacement spells toward exploiting Pandora's box. He uses the box to preserve his soul as he inhabits the bodies of his descendants. This same displacement is used to create dolls, artificial bodies bound to human souls. Pandora's box also plays a key role in creating class cards, robbing heroic spirits of their will for the sake of their masters. With it, Darius aims to defy the very root itself to create a world never before experienced. This makes me want to reflect on how mages, despite generally sharing the goal of reaching the root and gaining true magic, can differ quite a lot in terms of ambition and circumstance. Thus, for our next lesson, I wish to discuss the motivations of various mages. Perhaps, by doing so, you may be able to affirm or even challenge your own reasons for studying the craft. In our previous lesson, I covered the magecraft practiced by the Ainsworth family, including their use of class cards. Publicly, they sought their holy grail, Miusakatsuki, hoping to save their dying world. More specifically, Darius yearned to open Pandora's box and give rise to a new world not even accounted for by Akasha. Many mages generally aim to reach the root, not defy it, so the Ainsworth family stands out in this regard. It has me thinking that we shouldn't merely learn the whats and hows of magecraft, but we should also address why mages dedicate themselves as they do. Thus, for today's lesson, I wish to speak of mages and their varying motivations for learning the craft. Consider this an opportunity to reflect on what we've learned so far. Let it spark your ambition for lessons to come. As I said before, it is a general goal for most mages to one day reach Akasha, the root of all existence. By doing so, mages have the opportunity to obtain true magic. Following in the footsteps of mages like Zelrech, the Ainsburns, and the Aozaki, true magic is considered the pinnacle of magecraft, and any mage seeking greatness will no doubt covet the root in some form. Oftentimes, it's not even the true magic itself that entices mages, but rather the sheer prestige it comes with. Tokiomi Tosaka, for instance, seeks the root as a matter of principle. As pupils of Zelrech, it is no surprise that the Tosakas hope to reach the root, but their reason for doing so has changed slightly over time. Nagato Tosaka once allied with the Ainsburns to help them retrieve the magic of Heaven's Feel. They had lofty ambitions of improving the world with this magic, but following the initial Holy Grail War in Fuyuki, that once collaborative effort is now a competition. The root means nothing to Tokiomi personally, but in terms of his legacy, it is a natural pursuit. It's as logical for him as it was to send Sakura to another family so that both his daughters could practice magecraft. It's not just a matter of bloodline, though. The Yggdrasilania family, which have been struggling with its mage birthright, decided to separate itself from the Mages Association and pursue the root via their own methods. Rather than having one bloodline that produced ever more talented mages, the Yggdrasilania formed a clan by absorbing other struggling families. Through diversity, rather than purity, the clan still covets the root, even going so far as stealing the Greater Grail to do so. To some, the idea of reaching the root is boring and fruitless. As idealistic as true magic seems, if it doesn't grant any immediate material gain, then why bother? The heroic spirit Gilgamesh certainly feels this way about Tokiomi's ambition for the root. To him, reaching the root for the sake of prestige lacks humanity, emotion, and entertainment. As such, Gilgamesh, one of the strongest servants a mage can summon, would prefer to serve a master who pursues the Grail to satisfy more material and emotional needs. In other words, Gilgamesh favors mages like Kirei Kotomine. Initially, Kirei learned magecraft as part of his training for the Holy Church, and he became a master in the Fourth Grail War to help out Tokiomi. He claimed not to have any desires of his own, but Gilgamesh could sense that he did indeed have dormant wishes. Wishes so twisted and sinful he could hardly embrace them consciously. Kirei relished in tragedy, outright enjoying disasters like the Great Fire in Fuyuki. He would hide these morbid curiosities while performing his role as a church supervisor, planning in the long run to witness the birth of Angra Mainyu. In this regard, mages seeking to sate their personal material needs can prove to be more dangerous than those with more idealistic goals. It is because of this that we have mages like Kiritsugu and Shiro Emiya, who embrace magecraft as a means of fighting other mages. Kiritsugu's intimate knowledge of mages and their culture helps him exploit their weaknesses. For him, using magecraft against other mages is simply a matter of fighting fire with fire. Shiro has a similar yet purer goal. To him, magecraft is just a means to an end in protecting others as a hero of justice. It's a tool that can be used for good or evil, basing that morality on his own civilian experiences rather than mage culture. This is a trend among young mages who lack a traditional education in the craft. One's obligations as a mage will often conflict with one's desires as a human being, and those who have avoided being indoctrinated wind up being more in touch with modern society. Tokiomi's daughter, Rin, is a brilliant example. Her parental tutelage was cut short when Tokiomi died in the Fourth Grail War. Instead, her guardian became the detestable Kirei, sparking in her a sense of rebellion. She retains an ingrained obligation to win the Grail War and reach the root on behalf of the Tosaka lineage, but she's honestly more concerned with proving she can do it. She wants to live up to expectations, but this conflicts with her compassion and her desire to embrace Sakura as a sister. Call it her humanity or just naivete, but Rin is often reluctant to do what is considered as proper for a mage, such as killing otherwise innocent civilians. The same can be said for Ophelia Famersalone from Chaldea's Team A. Her family was hell-bent on developing a jewel-ranked mystic eye, subjecting her to a series of agonizing operations to boost her potential as a mage. Thus, while she showed great talent at the clock tower, Ophelia suffered immense trauma, and her lack of self-esteem ultimately crippled her. It is a tragic example of how the cruel, inhuman nature of many mages comes at a cost. Because of this, mages who retain a hopeful spirit tend to stand out. This can be seen in Justiz Liedrich von Einsburn. Her ancestors once obtained and lost the third magic, Heaven's Feel, which materializes the soul. The Einsburns seek to regain that lost magic while feeling entitled to it. Justiz was unique in that she saw the potential in Heaven's Feel to help humanity transcend their hatred and suffering by existing as materialized souls. Not only did she covet the root in search of true magic, she also saw that magic as a tool to improve the human condition. It's worth noting that Amakusa Shiro Tokisada, despite being an incarnated heroic spirit, fought for a similar outcome. Both Amakusa and Justiz saw materializing the soul as a form of salvation. Of course, such a feat would only save the currently living generation of humans. Those who have already died would be excluded. The Buddhist mage Soren Araya sought to focus specifically on these fallen souls. After living for over 300 years, Araya aimed to reach the root in order to give meaning to people's deaths. He cared less about true magic and was more interested in the root's Akashic records, which would allow him to investigate the lives of each and every person who has died. By finding their happiest or most profound moments, he felt he could bring meaning to otherwise pointless deaths. Mages can be very creative when it comes to imagining utopias. Kirstario Votim, hoping to save mankind from death and cruelty, arrived at a completely different conclusion. Rather than seeking the root for a true magic capable of preserving the soul, he instead planned to borrow power from an alien god to return mankind to the Age of Gods. by ascending all mortals into gods, he felt mankind would eventually forget the need to fight one another. Other mages, such as Cornelius Alba, have rather petty desires in comparison. He dedicated himself to the craft almost exclusively out of a desire to best his self-proclaimed rival, Toko Aozaki. In other words, he wanted to prove himself. Unlike Rin Tosaka, however, he lacked enough humanity to imagine a future beyond that point. Equally petty is Atram Galliasta, an arrogant mage with a lovely harem of beautiful concubines. Underestimating the craft, he entered the Fifth Holy Grail War hoping to attain wealth. Mind you, wealth is not inherently bad to wish for. The mage Marisbury Animesphere, for instance, once wished upon the Grail for the necessary funds to construct Chaldea, an organization instrumental in saving humanity from potential threats. The same can be said regarding the Atlas Institute, whose alchemists are constantly predicting doomsday events for the planet. These mages show how magecraft and technology need to oppose each other in a modern setting. The Peligore family prefers to pursue both magecraft and technology in tandem, establishing the Peligore Corporation. They manufacture computers, phones, and video games, which helps fund their magecraft research. This has allowed them to practice the art of shell projection. They are forward-thinking mages who clearly have a desire to preserve the craft as humans move further into a technological age. Innovation is often a key feature of mages without an established pedigree. Waver Velvet, for instance, naively wished to prove that mages could succeed even without having a long-established bloodline. By overcoming his own weaknesses, Waver works to teach and inspire future mages on modern magecraft theories. Modern thinking proves critical when the Earth's mana supply dries out. The very concept of magecraft is forced to change as mages turn to Spiritron hacking, continuing the craft through the Spiritron world of the Moon Cell. Many of these mages learn Spiritron hacking in order to survive, taking shelter in the virtual environment of Seraph after the Earth proves uninhabitable. Taking advantage of the Earth's sorry state, the Harvey conglomerate took over most of the planet, establishing an uncontested empire. Hoping to conquer not just the Earth, but also the Moon Cell, the family sent its heirs, Leonardo and Julius, to win the Moon Cell Holy Grail War. While the family's reign is no doubt tyrannical, Leo takes his efforts as a mage seriously, genuinely hoping to guide humanity forward as a monarch. On this more political front, the self-aware AI Twice H. Beastman seeks to harness the Moon Cell automaton for perpetuating warfare, believing that humanity actually advances most during times of strife and conflict. Other mages couldn't care less for the state of humanity's future, instead content with glorifying the past. Mages of the Wandering Sea, for instance, concern themselves with mages of old during the Age of Gods. They obsess over this era to the point where they straight up ignore the outside world, even as it deteriorates or comes under fire from emerging threats. In contrast, there are mages who are only concerned with the future, hoping to discover new innovations expected to occur long after their deaths. To overcome this, they seek immortality. Both the mages Michael Roa Valdemyong and Fabro Rowan find themselves becoming dead apostles to extend their lifespans. They are determined to experience the future, even if it means losing track of their original personalities. For some, however, immortality is a curse. CL, an executor of the church's burial agency, uses magecraft in order to slay Roa and make her body immortal once again. Clearly, not everyone wants the same thing. Of course, we can't forget about Kairi Shishigo, a man who is incapable of fathering a biological heir. Even his attempts to pass his magic crest onto an adopted daughter ended in the poor girl's death. Betting on a miracle, Kairi fights as a mage in the Great Grail War of Trefus in order to finally obtain a successor. Lastly, there tends to be a certain irony in the world of magecraft. Mages seek power as a matter of principle, yet lack the humanity needed to appreciate that power. Thus, to an ordinary human, such power may not seem that great. If magecraft does not bring the world happiness, then why pursue it so adamantly? This sentiment is encapsulated when Shiki Ryogi, a demon hunter manipulated from birth to have the origin of nothingness, decides to entrust her consciousness to separate personalities. Arguably, Shiki is the most powerful being alive, connected to and essentially one with the root itself. Despite this, her base personality, her void self, has no personal use for such power. After experiencing the world vicariously through her other personalities, the only time she considers using her connection to the root is for the sake of Mikia Kokto, an ordinary human she fell in love with. This young man is offered the kind of opportunity most mages can only dream of, and yet he declares he is happy enough just getting to be with Shiki for the rest of his mortal life. It's almost as if the root is only truly accessible to those who have no need for it. In summation, while mages commonly pursue the root as the pinnacle of magecraft, that idealistic goal is not as universal as one might expect. Mages are humans, complete with their own perks and flaws. Individualized desires emerge, and to attain them, magecraft merely becomes a means to that end. Some mages use the craft to protect the world, while others seek to destroy it. Some mages abandon their humanity to reach lofty goals, while others find that burden at odds with their compassion toward others. Even among mages striving to improve the world, their differing visions of that ideal utopia conflict with one another. Nearly all mages learn the craft to obtain one goal or another, but it's just as important to consider the ordinary things we take for granted. Hopefully, this has helped you reflect on your own goals. Honoring the spirit of this lesson, I would once again like to ask you for suggestions on what to cover in my next lesson. Tap into your curiosity and unveil your heart's deepest desires. In our previous lesson, I covered the various motivations that mages tend to have, including both common motives and more personal ones. The goal was to give you inspiration on what interests you in the study. I've since requested you share your ideal lesson topics with me, and easily one of the most popular happens to be the beasts of humanity. While beasts are not a direct application of magecraft, they are still relevant for playing a major part in our world's mysteries. They fall in line with the relevancy of heroic spirits, which is when I last mentioned the beasts in conjunction with the grand servants who are meant to fight them. Thus, for today's lesson, I will cover what the beasts are and how they form. It's worth noting that the beasts of humanity are very much like the 27 Dead Apostle ancestors in how they are never set in stone. Information about current beasts will inevitably fluctuate over time, so it's likely that details presented here will need to be updated. Nonetheless, I hope to present the fundamentals so that you can easily adapt to those changes on your own. Technically speaking, beasts of humanity are categorized as a class of heroic spirit, which may seem odd when you consider heroic spirits as, well, heroes. Why would the counterforce allow such atrocities? Why would beings capable of destroying all of humanity be included among the very forces meant to protect it? The answer is quite simple. It's in our very nature. Fittingly, beasts of humanity are born from evils of humanity, which are an intrinsic aspect of the human condition. Dr. Henry Jekyll, who dedicated himself to researching the difference between good and evil, discovered that humanity's evil is inseparable and cannot be defeated. It is something we will always be fighting against as intelligent beings. When this concept is manifested on a greater scale, it means that just as any human has the capacity to become a hero, we also have the capacity to become our own greatest threat. Allow me to clarify. Fortunately, just because we all have the capacity for evil, that does not mean any given person or creature is able to become a beast. Rather, only those who possess an authority of the beast can actually become a candidate. Similar to the Dead Apostle ancestors, beast-class servants are limited to open positions. In this case, they can fill the roles of Beasts 1 through 7, with each designated slot reserved for the embodiment of a specific sin. Please bear in mind, this is an entirely separate concept to the biblical 7 cardinal sins. This means that, at any given moment, there can only be 7 beasts, with some bizarre exceptions. Ironically, beast candidates aren't inherently malicious, despite everything I've said so far. They all possess, to some extent, a love for humanity. Their actions are more evil than their intentions, considering beasts threaten humanity in order to help it. It's a twisted logic that leaves room for human interpretation, which is exactly why the beasts are inevitable. Some of these candidates are born with the qualities of a beast, whereas others grow into it through their actions. This means that some candidates ascend to beasthood gradually, starting off as juvenile beasts and later ascending to their full might. In addition, some beasts manifest in parts, or halves, and this makes it difficult for the counterforce to respond. Unless a beast is considered fully mature as one of the 7 slots, the counterforce is unlikely to summon a Grand Servant to fight back. The mark of a fully grown or adult beast is a pair of massive horns we call the beast's crown. For the longest time, human history has never had to deal with any beasts. While the possibility has always been there, they've only begun emerging in more recent years. Those from the Age of Gods who understand the beasts, such as Gilgamesh, state that the beasts manifest in a chain reaction. The moment that one beast emerges, the others are sure to follow. It is feared that at the end of this chain reaction, a final evil for humanity will emerge. This is a genuine threat, one that the Atlas Institute predicts as one of the world's potential ends. The first position, Beast 1, is described by its sin of pity. Its occupant is none other than the demon god Hivemind Getia, an aggregation of the 72 demon gods created by King Solomon. As implied, Getia began to pity mankind after watching Solomon refuse to save his people, despite having God's 10 rings of knowledge. Getia deemed humanity's biggest problem to be death, and he yearned for a way to repair humans so that death did not exist. He was originally tasked to look after humans via the Human Order Correction Ritual, but his ambition to free humans of their imperfections changed into the Human Order Incineration Ritual. By incinerating all of human history, Getia aimed to use all that fuel to warp back in time to humanity's inception and birth them anew. It was this tremendous feat that made Getia into the first beast. He's since been defeated by Chaldea, but he continues to live on through his individual demon god pillars, which we classify as sub-beasts. The second position, Beast 2, is unique for its sin of regression, which is admittedly more abstract. It is filled by Tiamat, the primordial goddess of Mesopotamian mythology. In said mythos, both Tiamat and her husband Abzu birthed the other gods by uniting salt and fresh water. When these gods rebelled against Abzu, Tiamat actually supported them, loving her divine children more than her husband. Even so, these gods attacked her too, severing her body to create the heavens and earth. Because of this, Tiamat represents a discarded womb, a mother goddess used to produce life, only to be banished to the realm of imaginary numbers. During Getia's incineration of humanity, a singularity was formed around ancient Mesopotamia, and the Holy Grail allowed for Tiamat to awaken. Ironically, she serves as an enemy to mankind out of her love for them. More specifically, she wishes to be defeated by her children for the sake of their growth. Her defeat came as a result of Hassani Saba, the Grand Assassin, invoking the concept of death upon her. Her Lahmu and other creatures tainted by her Chaos Tide also qualify as sub-beasts. Beast 3 is more complicated. Its sin of pleasure can manifest through both depravity and lust, allowing this position to be split into opposing halves. These halves are known as left and right, lapse and rupture, black and white, or even yin and yang. Practically speaking, this means there are 2 incarnations of Beast 3, each diametrically opposed to the other, despite sharing the same basic sin. The first of these 2 to manifest is Beast 3R, occupied by a wicked woman named Kiara Seshoin. She was a Spiritron hacker carrying on the Shingon Tachikawa Eiten school of Buddhism, known for its sexual rituals. She gained a massive following of worshippers obsessed with her, and she fostered that obsession by encouraging both their lust and hatred for her. Kiara was the central figure of this religious practice. This was her way of saving humans, but ultimately these followers grew mad from their obsession, committing suicide. Through her efforts in the Mooncell Holy Grail War, she continued to use herself to bring people salvation, becoming a vessel for human pleasure on a cosmic scale. This form, Heaven's Whole, nearly made the entire Earth her plaything. In the timeline on which Chaldea is established, Kiara follows a more humble path, working at the Seraphix oil rig when she encounters Zepar, one of the lingering demon god pillars of Gaetia. Zepar used this Kiara as a vessel, possessing her as it took control of the oil rig and digitized it as a closed-off space where it could hide. As a result, Kiara inherited her nature from her Mooncell counterpart, developing an authority of the beast. Just like she did in the Mooncell, Kiara formed a cult with the surviving members of Seraphix, and once again yearned to save humanity by having them worship her. By conducting Grail Wars within this digitized Seraphix, Kiara amassed the strength needed to mature as the Beast of Pleasure. As a fully adult Beast 3R, she aimed to become one with the planet, bringing salvation to humanity. Fortunately, this transformation was never successfully completed, as her concept of love and salvation would have seemed apocalyptic to most. Beast 3L is occupied by the Hindu goddess of love, Kama, and his more wicked counterpart, Mara. Kama was a god who could bring lovers together by shooting them with flowery arrows from his sugarcane bow. This backfired when Kama was tasked with shooting Shiva with an arrow so that Shiva and Parvati could bear children. Angered, Shiva opened his third eye, burning Kama to ashes. Ever since, Kama has felt the need to rebel against love, and reasoned he could do this by narcissistically flooding the universe with his love. Unlike Kiara, who received all of humanity's love into herself, Kama would instead expand to give love to all of humanity. He took the form of a pseudo-servant in a woman's body before taking over the Tokugawa Oku. Interpreting the Oku as a place of lust, Kama defined the space as a labyrinth dedicated to the shogun's pleasure, and designed it through the 5 Buddhist precepts that condemn inappropriate behavior. Kama used this labyrinth as a nest while she matured as a beast, and to prove herself superior to Kiara, who would come before her, she sought to defeat Chaldea. She hoped to lure in Chaldea's master, Ritsuka, and have them break the 5 precepts to become a Tokugawa. Doing so would fill Kama with the power she needed to spread her love throughout the cosmos. Much like Kiara, however, her attempts were foiled by Chaldea's servants and Lady Kasuga of the Oku. Thus, both Beast 3L and R were vanquished while just on the verge of maturity. Subverting expectations, Beast 4 doesn't initially look like much of a threat to humanity. Cath Palug was the beast presiding over the sin of comparison. Before Cath Palug could ever become a major threat, he was tamed by the mage Merlin and made into a familiar. Cath Palug spent time in a tower at Avalon, where Merlin was sealed, but was eventually given the freedom to seek that which he found beautiful. The beast made his way to Chaldea and stayed at the facility as a pet named Foe. A tremendous amount of strength stirred within Foe, rarely ever being used. Ultimately, Foe gave up all of this power, discarding his authority as a beast in order to resurrect Mashu Kirielite through his force of providence. In the aftermath, Foe became nothing more than a regular animal. This left the position of Beast 4 open to new candidates, and was later filled by a being called Koyanskaya. In the year 1908, Russia was hit by an enormous explosion referred to as the Tunguska event. The explosion brought grief to the earth, killing helpless animals. From this tragedy, Koyanskaya manifested as a nature spirit representing these animals, and by extension, all animals who had been oppressed by humanity. She appears within the saint graph of Tamamo no Mae, who also bears resentment toward humans. Normally, this temporary manifestation would have disappeared not long after emerging, but because Cath Palug left a vacancy for Beast 4, Koyanskaya gained the authority of the beast and began working to mature as one under the sin of cherishment. Koyanskaya's supposed love for humanity is something intrinsic to all nature spirits. That is, humans are just as much a part of the earth as nature is. She loves humans in that they are a part of nature, but she also yearns for their demise because they threaten nature. Koyanskaya grows her tails by aiding the alien god and observing phantasmal beings through her NFF services company. Upon growing 6 tails, she finally ascends as the new Beast 4. Much to my dismay, the position of Beast 5 is a complete mystery. We can neither confirm its vacancy, nor discern who may be filling that role. Beast 5's associated sin also eludes us. It bears the same shade of mystery as the unknown true magics. We can confirm such openings exist, but that is the extent of our knowledge. Beast 6 is quite fascinating. I know I mentioned that the beast sins differ from biblical accounts, but in this specific case, we have an actual manifestation from the Book of Revelations. The Beast of 666 is a creature wearing 10 crowns that symbolize the sins of mankind. It has 7 heads, each representing the hills of the Roman Empire. For their crucifying of Jesus Christ, Romans have been described in the Bible as ones who oppose Christ, or in more contemporary terms, the Antichrist. Throughout the ages, the Beast of 666 has taken on traits of satanic and evil elements, so it's really no surprise that if such a being could be summoned, they would count as a beast of humanity. During one Holy Grail war, the mage known as Monica Saggio succeeded in doing just this. The souls of 7 servants combined to birth an infant of insolence. Its childlike nature is frightening, and it looks toward Monica as its mother. When she is attacked, the beast rampages as a devilish predator. Monica went through this trouble so that her servant, Arthur Pendragon, could have his wish of an eternal Britain. This, however, was not something Arthur asked for, and he instead took it upon himself to slay both Monica and the beast. Sadly, this assault was insufficient, merely placing the beast into a dormant state where it could resurrect Monica. As such, when Arthur was about to enter Avalon, Merlin tasked him with pursuing Beast 6 across other worlds, in a manner similar to Miyamoto Musashi. In his pursuit, Arthur noticed that Beast 6 had split into 2 aspects, an L and R just like Beast 3. With little information to go on, he only knows that Beast L possesses a noxious gas, while R has a lingering scent. It is worth noting that Monica herself is referred to as an evil of humanity. As if Arthur's journey weren't difficult enough on its own, yet another factor complicates his search for Beast 6. While Monica summoned the Beast of 666 through a Holy Grail war, it was a generic conception of the creature. Many scholars of St. John's Book of Revelation associate the beast with none other than Nero Claudius, the 5th emperor of Rome. When translated from Greek to Hebrew, Nero is the same as the number 666. Thus, she is often scrutinized as an antichrist, the whore of Babylon. This infamy put Nero in a position to become a version of Beast 6, labeled Beast 6S. Known as Sodom's Beast, Nero Claudius, in her juvenile form as the bewitching Queen Draco, took advantage of an alternate version of Getia's incineration to create imitation singularities. As opposed to Getia, Draco sought to completely erase the human order. Manipulating things from the shadows, she had the soul of Nebuchadnezzar II possess Gilgamesh's corpse. As Gilgamesh II, he turned Babylonia into a realm of sin that Draco could feed upon to mature as a beast. Through this, she ascended from a larval state into a truly terrifying monstrosity. Like the other beasts before her, Chaldea took to the fight and defeated her alongside Arthur and the Grand Rider Noah. Despite this effort, the Beast 6 that Arthur pursues still exists, and yet another version, 6G, is expected to emerge before long. At this point, however, it has yet to do so. Our final example, Beast 7, is occupied by the alien god hoping to invade Earth through one of 7 lost belts. Just as Gilgamesh predicted, the rise of Getia as Beast 1 has been followed by the emergence of a 7th beast, the beast that announces the end. Very little is known about this alien god, other than how it came to Earth in response to experiments being conducted on another of its kind. Upon arrival, the god bleached the planet and planted 7 fantasy trees, each connected to a world that the universe would have otherwise discarded. The alien aimed to descend into whichever lost belt thrived the most, which happened to be at Olympus. Perhaps due to sabotage from the mage Kirshtaria Vodim, the alien god incarnated on Earth in the body of a mortal girl, Olga Marie Animosphere. Choosing to call herself You Olga Marie, she awaits as an even more powerful vessel can be located for her. Her desire is to conquer Earth and subjugate humanity. Under the Beast class, it's quite possible she'll be able to do so. As of this moment, those are all the currently existing beasts of humanity. Beyond that, there are evils of humanity who may eventually achieve a similar status. The nefarious Ashia Doman, for instance, hoped to ascend Ibuki Doji as a beast embodying Yamata no Orochi. Daji, the manipulative Chinese vixen, also counts as an evil of humanity alongside the divine kami Amaterasu. Angra Mainyu, a pitiful man famed as all the world's evils, is also rather obviously considered an evil of humanity. It's in the nature of his tragedy, after all. Had things gone differently during Fuyuki's Fifth Holy Grail War, I fear he too could have become one of the beasts. In summation, beasts of humanity are a class of servant born directly from human nature. So long as we remain intelligent beings, the possibility for evil will never go away. Certain entities considered evils of humanity may find themselves earning a beast's authority, becoming candidates for the beast class. For most of them, they must start in a more fragile state and slowly mature. At any given moment, there are 7 available positions for beasts, each based on a specific aspect of humanity's sins or evils. They may seek destruction, but deep down, they all possess an ironic love for humans that compels their villainy. Some beasts, like 3 and 6, can manifest in split selves, most commonly a left and right form. To some degree, Chaldea has faced off against and defeated nearly all of these beasts, with the exceptions of Beast 5, which has yet to be encountered, Beast 6, which Arthur is still chasing after, and Beast 7, who is still looking for a proper vessel. Even should these beasts be slain, there's still no chance humanity will ever be able to completely escape from the birth of new beasts. For our next lesson, I plan to speak of another special source of mystery, that being the Demon Hunter organization and its associated families. In our previous lesson, I covered the beasts of humanity, expanding our traditional understanding of Magecraft by learning about the broader mysteries of our world. Continuing in that vein, I hope to mention demons, or Oni kind, and the now defunct Demon Hunter organization that fought them. Not only will this contribute to your repertoire of mystical creatures, but hopefully it will introduce you to some interesting psychic abilities as well. In the context of Magecraft, demon is a bit of a blanket term for beings that distort the laws of nature through mana. At first glance, this might sound like the very definition of a mage, but the distinguishing factor here is that demons aren't just using magical energy, but are actually magical beings themselves. In many cases, demons and monsters are referred to interchangeably, with many of them overlapping as phantasmal species. Asterios, the famed Minotaur, for instance, was born as a monster. Medusa, after transforming into the cursed Gorgon monster, also counts as a demon. Succubi and occasionally vampires qualify as well, but for our purposes, the specific kind of demon we'll be investigating today are the Oni kind. Oni are a race of Japanese demi-humans that take many shapes. Most often, they appear as malicious horned goblins that live in mountains and caves. Akuji no Takamaru, or King Akuji, fits this description. Not all male Oni are quite so monstrous, however. Otakemaru, for example, maintains a more humanoid shape. A great many Oni also happen to be female. Otakemaru's killer, Suzuka Gozen, also has demon blood, despite lacking the iconic horns. A more pure-blood example would be Shutendoji, the seductive demon who basked in luxury atop Mount Oe. Since ancient times where most of these Oni thrived, there have been many human families that sought to crossbreed with them. This blend of genetic traits gave way to mixed bloods, humans with abnormal powers. Such abilities include superhuman strength, regenerating one's own body, absorbing the heat or life force of others, and even controlling Shikigami, a form of Japanese familiar. The dynamic between Oni and mixed bloods parallels that of true ancestors and their dead apostles. Not only do mixed bloods derive from pure-blood Oni, they also suffer a similar setback akin to the dead apostles' bloodlust. In the case of mixed bloods, humans need to avoid being completely consumed by their demon blood. They suffer from inversion impulses, which rob them of their sanity. On an even greater scale, some mixed bloods can fully succumb to inversion, becoming what we call crimson red vermilion. In exchange for tremendous might, humans who reach this stage can no longer return to normal, and will spend the rest of their days as bloodthirsty monsters. This was helpful in ancient Japan when other phantasmal species still roamed. Minamoto no Raiko, for instance, actually used these mixed blood powers to slay Oni. Tomoe Gozen, who inherited Oni blood from her mother, used her powers as a famous soldier against the tyrannical Taira clan. In the modern day, however, this Oni blood is detrimental. Mixed blood clans hoping to integrate with modern society must do so by suppressing their powers. The esteemed Tono family, for example, has a strict policy of killing any of its members that happen to invert. The family's head, Makihisa Tono, takes drugs to restrain his Oni blood, and avoids inversion by forcing himself on the young housemaid Kohaku. She and her sister Hisui have synchronization, a type of psychic ability that lets them transfer energy through bodily fluids. Kohaku's suffering aided Makihisa till his death, and thereon as a source of blood for his daughter Akiha. Akiha in particular has very thick Oni blood, and she approaches crimson red vermilion when her adoptive brother Shiki returns to the Tono mansion. The Tonos maintain relations with various branch families, such as the Saikis, who also carry Oni blood. The Kishimas are the most powerful mixed bloods by far, with the assassin Koma Kishima having already turned crimson red vermilion. As a child, his clan tried to hide him in isolation. Kept in a dark, traditional Japanese room, he grew up with minimal socialization, only learning to restrain his inversion impulse. He knew he was a monster, and accepted his confinement to protect his family. That is, until his kin were hunted down and slaughtered. This brings us to our main topic. For as long as there have been Oni, there have also been demon hunters. More specifically, there is the Demon Hunter Organization, a unity of 4 ancient families that fight back against Oni and mixed bloods through the use of psychic abilities. In general, psychic powers, or extrasensory perception, ESP, are a form of magecraft that cannot be taught. Rather, they are born from a mutation that allows an individual to perceive reality in a unique way. Think of it like an extra channel for perception, a sixth sense that only those who possess it understand. Normally, psychic powers are both spontaneous and extremely rare, but demon hunters have found ways to increase their chance of developing between generations. It is ironic, however, because psychic powers in the modern era are considered detrimental in the same way that inversion impulse is. Hunters gained these powers to fight mixed bloods, but now that so few of them remain, said powers have become dangerous and unwanted. This means that both the Oni kind and demon hunters are just shadows of their former selves, doing their best to blend in with society in spite of the unique abilities that allowed them to thrive in generations prior. Ultimately, the Demon Hunter organization consists of 4 families: the Nanaya, Ryogi, Fujo, and Asakami. The most iconic are the Nanayas, a family that stubbornly continued to fight mixed bloods even in the modern age. Thanks to this, they were targeted as a major threat. After the family's head, Kiri Nanaya, slaughtered most of the Saiki family, Makihisa Tono arranged to fight back. Makihisa recruited Koma Kishima, who used his demonic power to slaughter the Nanayas, just as his own clan had been decimated. Kiri Nanaya was killed in the ensuing chaos, but his son, Shiki Nanaya, was suspiciously spared and adopted into the Tono family. Makihisa must have taken pity on the boy, because his own son happened to also be named Shiki. Due to the trauma of seeing his family massacred by Koma Kishima, Shiki Nanaya walled off those painful memories. Even so, his instincts as a demon hunter still emerge from time to time. This, paired with the mystic eyes of death perception he developed from a fatal injury, makes him especially deadly. Not to be confused with Shiki Nanaya or Shiki Tono is Shiki Ryogi, heir to the Ryogi family. Since way back, the Ryogis have fostered a psychic ability for dual personalities. Under the belief that a person can only master one skill in their entire lifetime, the Ryogis create a second personality so that they may master two separate skills. This psychic ability might not sound too dangerous for the modern era, but a great many of the Ryogi have wound up losing their sanity from being unable to mediate their two selves. There's always the risk that Ryogi heirs will develop murderous tendencies. It's really no surprise then that this family thrives in modern society as a Yakuza sect. Shiki Ryogi, their current heir, was born with the origin of nothingness, giving her a direct connection to the root. When awakened to this origin as an infant, Shiki's base personality rejected this enormous power by receding beneath two other personalities, one male and the other female. After trauma of her own, a suicidal car impact, Shiki developed her own variant of the mystic eyes of death perception. It's ironic that, rather than hunting demons as her ancestors once did, Shiki has more experience fighting against the other remaining demon-hunting families. Of them are the Asakami, who now live on through their branch family, the Asagamis. Their psychic ability is telekinesis, allowing them to bend and manipulate physical objects with their minds. The main family, the Asakami, once began to worship the very demons they hunted. Through continued inbreeding, the Asakami diluted their blood, becoming one with their former enemies. In contrast, the Asagami faction has remained human. To blend into modern society, they deny their demon-hunting heritage by trying to completely erase their telekinesis. Thus, when the family's heir, Fujino, was born, her father overdosed her with a medication that would seal away her powers. As a side effect, Fujino lost the ability to feel pain. This remained until, during high school, her powers were reawakened from being struck in the spine with a baseball bat. Initially, she used her telekinesis to murder the group of delinquents who assaulted her, but a near-death encounter from fighting Shiki Ryogi wound up returning her to her senses. She now lives as an ordinary student while possessing the incredible mystic eyes of distortion. The last demon hunter family I wish to cover is the Fujo clan. They come from a lineage of shrine maidens, or Miko. Unlike the others, the fate of this clan differs from one world to the next. In one, the Fujos possess the psychic ability to see into the world of spirits. In another, they are actually a bloodline of mages who used curses. Hisui and Kohaku, who I mentioned before were synchronizers, actually belong to a distant branch family of the Fujos, one that broke a taboo and fell to ruin. In either case, the Fujo clan specialized in channeling spirits, often losing their sight in the process. Despite being demon hunters, this specialty had other uses that helped the family better transition to the modern era. Since then, they had mostly died out naturally, with the last surviving heir being Kirie Fujo, a sad woman who lost her parents and brother during a car accident. For 10 years, Kirie spent her life bedridden in a hospital, blinded due to a terminal illness. She likely would have stayed in this state till her death, if not for the intervention of Soren Araya. He awakened Kirie to her family's abandoned power, allowing her to project herself outside the hospital in a ghost body. Hoping to communicate with others, she possessed a series of schoolgirls, causing them to commit suicide by jumping off a nearby apartment complex. Despite knowing what happened to these girls, Kirie was so desperate to connect with friends that she continued to possess victims. And when this killing spree came to an end, she reasoned the only way to free herself from torment was to leap from the very same building. With Kirie's death, the Fujo clan is no more. In summation, the Demon Hunter organization is a group of 4 families who have long since hunted mixed bloods, humans who crossbred with Oni kind. While the blood of demons made mixed bloods powerful, demon hunters rose to the occasion by developing different psychic abilities. With no clear victor to this conflict, the modern era set in first, rendering their respective powers irrelevant and even harmful. In order to blend in with society, both mixed blood and demon hunter families have tried to suppress themselves to varying degrees of success. Akiha Tono risks being overtaken by her demon blood, whereas Koma Kishima has already lost himself to it. Shiki Nanaya has gone on not to fight demons, but rather dead apostles. Shiki Ryogi and her husband Mikia break the cycle, with their daughter Mana having no supernatural powers whatsoever. Fujino Asagami has decided to live on despite her hardships, remaining in control of her powers without abusing them, whereas the Fujo clan has completely died off. I imagine it won't be long till both the demons and their hunters become nothing but a relic of the past. A sad story of two warring forces who trickled out with the times just like the gods. A while back, I spoke of the Ultimate Ones, powerful beings beyond our own Earth. One could certainly say such beings are alien, relative to ourselves anyway. It turns out that there are a handful of other interstellar creatures in this world that can be described as aliens. Thus, for our next lesson, I want to focus on clarifying the vague terminology of different extraterrestrial and even interdimensional beings that mages have come across. In our previous lesson, I covered the Demon Hunter organization and the interesting psychic abilities they once employed. So far, we've covered many creatures, from the Ultimate Ones, phantasmal species, dead apostles, and true ancestors. But there are still further depths to which we can explore our universe and beyond. Generically, I'm referring to aliens, beings that fall outside of humanity and our immediate solar system. Sometimes, even more than knowledge itself, it is more valuable to know what we don't know. Thus, for today's lesson, I aim to discuss the very limits of our comprehension, as mages do in fact find themselves on the front lines of discovery. Ultimate Ones, the living embodiments of celestial bodies in our solar system, most certainly count as alien. Given they have a lesson all to their own, however, I will forego them in lieu of discussing even more distant beings. Starting off, it's worth noting how the concept of aliens pertains to mystery. The very notion of life beyond Earth is ever present in our historical mythology. With or without any verifiable proof, the supernatural concept of alien creatures influences our culture and beliefs, which in turn offer new avenues for spellcasting. For example, Elena Blavatsky was a prominent figure among mages for her writings on occultism. She studied the lost Lemurian continent, thought to be the ancestral home of humans. In order to free herself from the Association's watchful eye, she faked her own death, going on to further her research in secret. Part of this study led her to the Earth creation myth of Sanat Kumara, a deity who came to our planet from Venus. As a servant, Elena recreates Sanat Kumara's power, invoking the image of a flying saucer. She claims to have acquired this ability when, in the Nevada desert, her consciousness was taken to Alpha Centauri and shown visions of the cosmos. Specifically, the iconic aliens popularized at Area 51 play a major role not in just myth, but also in reality. We'll come back to that later. The Mesoamerican god Quetzalcoatl was originally worshipped as the Mayan god Kukulkan, who is described as an alien being made from bacteria and microorganisms carried to Earth on a meteorite that crashed down in the Yucatan Peninsula. Mind you, a legend like this doesn't have to be factually true to empower divine spirits, so long as their worshippers believed it during the Age of Gods, when mystery was at its peak. In fact, it's quite common for gods to be affiliated with planets, especially Venus, regardless of whether they actually hailed from there. Beyond legend and superstition, however, we mages have certainly encountered real-life aliens of various kinds. In some parallel worlds, humanity is greatly influenced by the Moon Cell, a powerful supercomputer on our very own moon. It consists of photonic crystals made 4.6 billion years before the Age of Man. The Moon Cell itself is thought to have been created by an unknown civilization that predates both the Earth and Moon by 100 million years. Ever since, it has observed the Earth, recording every development much like the Akashic records of the Root. While we don't know much about the aliens that created it, we do know that the Moon Cell makes strides to learn about humanity, inviting humans to communicate with it remotely. Ancient mages used to meditate as a form of connecting with it, and in the modern era, wizards inhabit its virtual environment Seraph via Spiritron hacking. Of course, it is possible to visit the Moon Cell directly, but ever since its official discovery in 1973, the Harvey conglomerate has banned all shuttles to the Moon in order to claim its power for themselves. While we often rely on the Earth's own will, the counterforce, to protect us, we have the Moon Cell to thank for keeping us hidden from yet another alien creation, Velber, the Umbral Star. The very same alien race that created the Mooncell also created Velber as another observational device that, rather than observing the development of life, instead observes the destruction of civilization. It travels the universe in search of planets that have been marked for their developed societies. It then dispatches shards, or arcs of the stars, to those planets, and they each contain unique void cells that bring about destruction through various means. Clearly, these aliens were interested in both the alpha and omega of intelligent civilization. Perhaps due to oversight, these two interests conflict with one another, making the Mooncell and Umbral Star enemies. In the year 12,000 BC, Velber came to Earth and marked humanity for extinction. It sent down 3 separate arcs, known as the older brother, Sephar, and the younger sister. Of these 3, only Sephar showed any activity, leaving the other 2 a mystery to this day. Sephar's shard crashed into the Mooncell, managing to delete 80% of its data before being quarantined. Onto the Earth, Sephar projected itself as a gigantic white titan that nearly wiped out humanity. The gods, and even servants summoned by the counterforce, all tried to stop the titan, but many perished in the process. Ultimately, the White Titan was felled by the light of Excalibur, leaving Sephar's main body trapped in isolation within its arc, where it would wait until Velber could cycle back and revisit the Earth once more. Ever since, the Mooncell has jammed Velber's sensors, ensuring that a second encounter never occurs. Sephar was originally one of Velber's prior victims. Her civilization of giants was destroyed 14,000 years ago, and her data as royalty of these giants was used in the creation of a void cell. Luckily, she was not fated to remain Velber's pawn forever. Instead, while trapped within the Mooncell, she had the chance of experiencing a second life within the remains of the White Titan killed on Earth, which was reborn as Attila the Hun. After an entire lifetime dreaming through Attila's eyes, Sephar developed her own ego and eventually decided to oppose her creator. Even without the Mooncell, Earth is a target for Velber on all other timelines as well, influencing the course of history in a variety of ways. Those most affected by Sephar's appearance are the gods of Greek mythology, who differ from typical divine spirits in that their true forms are actually machines. In a universe adjacent to our own, a completely different alien race was on the verge of extinction. In an attempt to seek a new home for themselves, they created a flagship called Chaos using the core of a star as a Dyson sphere. They tasked it with searching their dying universe for a sustainable planet. Tragically, despite Chaos's completion, its founders died out before such a home could be found. Regardless, Chaos scoured the universe and was unable to complete its objective. Continuing onward, it sought to explore our universe, and to slip through the barrier between its universe and ours, it used up 97% of its functionality to dispatch a smaller fleet that would continue the journey in its stead. As you might expect, this new fleet of machines found Earth to be a suitable planet for their creators. However, since their creators had already gone extinct, the machines decided to settle on Earth, looking after the humans that worshipped them as gods. Through a contract with the planet, these machines became legitimate divine spirits, communicating with their subjects through humanoid terminals. When Sephar attacked Earth, these machine gods fought against her, only to die in the process. Their machine bodies were destroyed, leaving only their humanoid forms behind. One exception is the Atlantic Lost Belt, in which Zeus appropriated the other god's strength to vanquish the White Titan without casualties. In a different Lost Belt, humanity lacks Excalibur altogether, allowing Sephar to ravage the Earth unopposed, once again greatly impacting human history. Then we have an alien often called the Alien God, otherwise known as the Foreign God. In truth, this being is not actually a god at all, but given its tremendous strength, people deify it in absolute awe regardless. Referring back to Area 51, I feel it's safe to say that the round-headed Martians associated with the complex are mostly a work of the imagination. That said, there certainly was a type of alien creature that crash-landed on Earth and was taken to Area 51. Researchers discovered this being in a near-death state and labeled it Specimen E. Within the Area 51 facility, scientists performed cruel experiments on the tree-like creature, hoping to see how it would react to intense levels of pain. Naturally, this caused Specimen E to develop a profound hatred for humanity, prompting it to emit radio waves as a distress signal. Fascinated, the scientists hoped to lure in yet another of its kind by performing even harsher experiments. The one to answer this call for help was what we now call the alien god. With the apparent goal of rescuing its kin and conquering the planet, the alien god arrived on Earth and annihilated almost all of humanity with a great bleaching. Upon the planet's surface, it planted various fantasy trees, which would in turn link to lost belts on the verge of being pruned from existence. By having these lost belts compete with one another, the alien god fostered an environment suitable for its rebirth as a beast of humanity. At present, the alien god has descended within the body of Olga Marie Animosphere, though this may have been due to a premature awakening at Olympus. Taking on Olga's personality, the alien god, now calling herself You Olga Marie, seeks a stronger vessel to continue her assault on humanity. The last sort of alien I wish to discuss transcends the very concept of an alien. I mean to say that there exist beings that live outside the parallel universes we know of, making them beyond human understanding. These are the outer gods, or evil gods of the abyss. While we try to describe and characterize the outer gods, our attempts ultimately fail to properly grasp just what they are and what they're capable of. We mostly know of their existence through the fictional mythos of author H.P. Lovecraft. I say fictional, but the visions upon which Lovecraft based his stories are actually real, making him the single dreamer of their existence before they began appearing within heroic spirits of the foreigner class. Using artifacts like the Necronomicon, mages such as Francois Prelati and Gilles de Rais have been able to summon these Lovecraftian horrors without a complete understanding of them. Their presence alone can drive humans to insanity, but despite being called outer gods, they possess fleshly mortal bodies that contradict what we normally think of as gods. Nonetheless, humans have found themselves coming into contact with the outer gods, ultimately ascending with them as heroic spirits, or at the very least, hybrid beings similar to pseudo-servants created when gods inhabit mortal vessels. Due to the machinations of the demon god pillar Raum, Abigail Williams was made into a vessel for Soot Typhon, the outer god of the Six Gates, also known as Yog-Sothoth. In this hybrid form, Abigail gains access to gateways to other realms, most notably one associated with the evil tree Cliffoth, which distorts human minds. The famed Japanese painter Katsushika Hokusai once made contact with the outer god Cthulhu through reading a Chinese copy of a Rillier grimoire, thereby influencing his artistic tendency to depict Occupy. His daughter, Katsushika Oi, later became a foreigner-class servant channeling Cthulhu's powers. In addition, we have Yang Guifei, the princess associated with the Tang dynasty's downfall. As a servant, she manifests alongside an outer god believed to be Cthulhu. The evil god of flowers, thought to be Volthum, created a mixed servant consisting of Vincent van Gogh and the Greek nymph Clytie. This outer god may have been responsible for driving Van Gogh to suicide. Lastly, we have Jacques de Molay of the Knights Templar. Under suspicion of using black magic and heresy, he was burned at the stake, forever tainting his spirit origin. This makes him compatible with the evil god Shub-Niggurath, the Holy Mother of the Abyss. As such, a servant form exists with Jacques fighting as a female vessel for the outer god. In summation, the term alien, as it pertains to mages, can refer to a number of different beings. Some are merely myths and legends given form, while others are ancient races we know little about. The most terrifying are beings beyond our comprehension, wielding tremendous power that threatens our entire species. In all such cases, it is recommended that you approach with extreme caution. You'd best have your fundamentals down before even considering it. Speaking of fundamentals, for our next lesson, we will discuss Kabbalah, the foundation upon which a majority of Magecraft is based. In our previous lesson, I covered the various entities that mages may refer to as aliens, such as Velber, the Greek machine gods, the foreign god, and the outer gods told of in the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. It's a far-out concept, and while it is important to cover, I would like to bring us back to Earth with some fundamentals. Specifically, I wish to cover one of the most widely used thaumaturgical systems out there, Kabbalah. In essence, Magecraft is the process of using mana to create physical changes in the outside world. That said, there are many ways to do this, with some being far more efficient than others. It all relies on the concept of mystery, or the concealment of truth. While we've explored the tremendous importance of Magecraft's future relationship through science and technology, the hard truth is that the Magecraft we're more used to is dying as empirical discoveries are made. Gods, for instance, are supernatural beings born from our human worship. As science continues to explain our world, the need and value of believing in the supernatural fades. Thus, the gods cannot remain in our world and have retreated to the reverse side. In other words, our beliefs and superstitions are key to performing spells. That inherent mystery creates the foundation upon which we construct our craft. This means that the very concept of studying and teaching Magecraft is a bit ironic. To reveal a mage's secrets is to deprive them of their power. Instructors must find a balance between teaching these concepts and maintaining their mysterious properties. Something that helps this process is a Thaumaturgical System, an established school of Magecraft based on popular mythology or superstition. Astrology, alchemy, Inshinsendo, for instance, are different ways of looking at the world that don't rely on objective truth. Even as something like astrology is disproven by science, it has an established history that can be studied and worshipped. Thus, basing one's Magecraft on the positioning of stars in the night sky can still be effective even in the modern era. While various mysteries are being cleared away, these established mythologies and mystical concepts better stand the test of time. Religion and spirituality remain fertile as thaumaturgical systems, and one of Magecraft's most robust is the Hebrew mysticism of Kabbalah. In Hebrew, Kabbalah translates to receiving and is based around the idea of better understanding the true nature of God. More accurately, Jewish mystics aim to comprehend Ainsworth, the infinite and endless state of the universe prior to God's materialization. It is God's form before becoming what we conventionally understand him to be. In order to understand the Ainsworth, mystics study and worship the 10 Sephirot, the creative forces God uses to create and preside over the universe. Kabbalah presumes a symbiotic nature between the Creator and his creations, meaning that God's children seek intimacy with him. They do so through 3 distinct dimensions. First, Kabbalists investigate and interpret sacred texts such as the Zohar and the Bible, while spreading that knowledge orally. They heed what they presume to be direct revelations from angels or prophets. Through a life of discipline and worship, Kabbalists hope to understand God not just logically, but also physically and emotionally. On a practical level, these worshippers seek to exercise power over the world, tapping into the powers of angels, demons, and other supernatural energies. In this way, they hope to further God's will of serving justice and punishing evil. This is where Magecraft enters the picture. If we interpret these ancient texts and mystical powers as fragments of the root, we can base our spells and rituals off Kabbalism as a foundation. Put another way, we mages are standing on the back of a profound religious mysticism for our own gain, and it has served us so well that even the Orders of the Clock Tower rely on it. Thus, to understand how mages utilize Kabbalah, it is important for us to understand the fundamentals of Kabbalah. Again, Kabbalists seek an intimacy with Ainsworth by understanding the 10 emanations, or powers that God uses to rule both the physical world and other metaphysical realms. These are the 10 Sephirot, or Sephiroth, which are diagrammed on the Tree of Life. This diagram is filled with abundant meaning, with the exact arrangement of elements notating all sorts of relationships. I will lean toward brevity, as this is meant to be introductory. Notice there are 3 pillars. The Sephira on the right are the masculine side, associated with harmony and benevolence. Those on the left are the feminine side, associated with power and justice. They are balanced by the central column, which mediates between mercy and justice. In addition, each Sephira is paired with an archangel. Standing at the top, we have Keter, the crown, linked to the archangel Metatron. It represents God's living energy throughout the universe, and understanding this Sephirot leads to spiritual enlightenment. Working our way down, on the right we have Chokmah, or wisdom, linked to the archangel Raziel. It represents the wisdom granted to humans, and how they can use it in practical situations to reach their full potential. Below that is Chesed, or mercy, linked with the archangel Zadkiel. It represents the entire right column as God's compassion, encouraging people to be kind to one another. Even lower is Netzach, or victory, linked with the archangel Haniel. It represents God being absolute and eternal, a reliable figure for people to worship. In the upper left is Bina, or intelligence, linked with the archangel Zaphkiel. It represents how God provides his children insight and guidance in their daily lives. Below that is Gevurah, or strength, linked with the archangel Hamuel. It represents the needed strength to set boundaries so that one may better focus on God. Even lower is Hod, or honor, linked by both archangels Michael and Raphael. It represents the need to express God's glory in the face of corruption and sin. Stepping down from Keter at the top, we have Tiphareth, or beauty, also linked to Michael and Raphael. It represents harmony and compassion. Below that is Yesod, or foundation, linked to the archangel Gabriel. It represents the base of the tree, where mortal men can connect with their divine creator. At the very bottom is Malkuth, or kingdom, linked to the archangel Sandalphon. It represents the manifestation of God's will, the result of Keter traveling through the other Sephirah to his children below. In other words, we are God's kingdom. Another variation of the Tree of Life has an 11th Sephirah known as Dath, or knowledge, but most commonly, there are the main 10. Equally important to mages is the Kabbalistic term Shem Hamfarash, the name of God expressed within 72 syllables taken from the Hebrew Bible. The Book of Exodus contains 3 passages that, when read in Hebrew, contain 72 Hebrew letters. By writing these letters out in 3 distinct rows, one can form a total of 72 names from the columns, each composed of 3 letters. Each 3-letter name is an abbreviation for one of the 72 angels of Jacob's ladder, and each of those can be read in 3 syllables. As you may have guessed, this number, 72, is also aligned with the demon gods conjured by King Solomon. In a generic sense, Kabbalah often finds meaning in specific arrangements of letters. Notarikon, then, is a term for the ability to abbreviate words into fewer letters, and to derive a complex name from those letters. Beyond the 72 angels of Kabbalah, Notarikon is also responsible for the term Amen, which is an acronym for the phrase Adonai, El Melech Neman, which roughly translates to, Lord, O faithful King. Kabbalah also finds meaning in the arrangement of numbers, a process of number play called gematria. For example, the 72 angels can be split into groups of 6 to represent the 12 zodiac signs. The number 7 is considered a perfect number. It takes this meaning from how God created the universe in 7 days. There are also 7 weeks between Passover and Shavat, during which people strive to perfect the 7 emotions of love, fear, compassion, ambition, humility, bonding, and receptiveness. 8, however, is considered a step up from the natural order, representing transcendence and divinity. Hanukkah is 8 days long, resulting from a miracle beyond nature. The 8 oil lights lit during that time align with 8 of the Sephirot. Naturally, the number 72 is a multiple of 8. All of this knowledge translates quite well into Magecraft. For instance, a mage can base their spells off of any of these important numbers or phrases. Mages can mask their secrets behind hidden codes like the Shem Hamfarash, or even invoke the qualities and characteristics of angels. While Kabbalah has been a foundation for Magecraft since its inception, many attribute the coining of the term to the mage Solomon ibn Gabirol, or Avisebron. He was an 11th century poet and philosopher born in Spain. While his written works brought Jewish lore to Europe, his thaumaturgical exploits focused on golemancy. Golems happen to derive from various cultural spheres, but when it comes to Kabbalah, the term is synonymous with Adam from the Garden of Eden. This story varies depending on its publication, but in the Talmud, Adam is described as a golem, with his dust kneaded into a shapeless husk. Using the Book of Yetzirah, Avisebron hoped to bring salvation to his war-torn era by creating the ultimate golem, Keter Malkuth, a recreation of Adam. In life, Avisebron was unable to make this dream a reality, but as a heroic spirit, he had the opportunity to finish the job. The completed Adam is his noble phantasm, Royal Crown, the Light of Wisdom, which is an autonomous reality marble that repaints the world into the Garden of Eden with its every step. When grounded, this golem receives the blessings of the earth and cannot be destroyed unless it is toppled in some form. Even without the golem Keter Malkuth, Avisebron is adept in mass-producing all sorts of golems. Through Notarikon, the play on words we discussed earlier, he is able to compress his commands and issue them to multiple golems at a time. This process of condensing syllables to increase spellcasting efficiency is known as numerology. It is used by mages such as Aoko Aozaki, whose Starmine and Starbow thaumaturgy relies on quickly converting spells from images in her mind. Michael Roa Valdemyong also relies on numerology when conjuring various lightning-based attacks. As creating golems involves breathing life into otherwise inanimate materials, it makes sense that a man seeking immortality might find Kabbalistic techniques very useful. Jewel Magecraft also derives power from Kabbalah. Both rubies and sapphires are associated with the cosmos, which in turn line up with the Sephirot Gevurah and Chesed respectively. Also, the mage Garion Ashbourne modeled his entire workshop, the Adra Castle, or Castle of Separation, with Kabbalah as its foundation. Not only were its halls decked out in all manner of angelic symbolism, but its various rooms were also named according to the Shemhem Farash. He used this workshop to perform repairs on magic crests until his death, but during a struggle for his inheritance, the castle was destroyed by the light of Rongo Minyad. In summation, Kabbalah is one of many thaumaturgical systems upon which mages can base their craft. Even as science threatens to overturn mystery, it is efficient for mages to utilize these pre-established mythologies for their own gain. Kabbalah is the Jewish practice of becoming closer to God through mysticism and understanding the creative forces God uses to govern the universe. Its meaning comes from the arrangement and cryptography of names and numbers, giving mages a variety of ways to construct their workshops and spells. Kabbalah may be perhaps the most commonly used thaumaturgical system, but there are also many others worth investigating. Thus, for our next lessons, I aim to cover a variety of other foundations that mages have come to rely on. In our previous lesson, I covered Kabbalah, which is quite likely the most popular thaumaturgical system mages use. Put bluntly, Magecraft is struggling in the modern era. Mystery, which serves as a foundation for our manipulation of mana, has been in steady decline ever since the Age of Gods came to an end. People no longer live according to their mythologies and superstitions. More accurately, the many diverse ways of thought and belief we once had are now streamlined by the clarity of science and technology. This means that Magecraft is a lot easier to perform if we rely on pre-established schools of thought that have better stood the test of time. We call these thaumaturgical systems, and while Kabbalah is a prominent one, there are many more systems I would like to focus on today. This includes major areas of study, as well as generalized motifs common among them. Given how prominent Kabbalah is to Magecraft, it makes perfect sense that both Christianity and the teachings of the Holy Church would count as their own school of thaumaturgy. In terms of practice, this includes the use of holy sacraments, as well as certain kinds of black magics. Let us not get lost in nuance. Members of the Church often practice Magecraft, but due to conflict with the association, the Church prefers to call its methods sacraments, and even refer to mana as prayer power. As much as they want to separate themselves, they are indeed performing Magecraft, just under a different name. A sacrament, then, refers to a tool or spell that is employed against heretics and other spiritual beings like demons and vampires. I'm certain by now you are all familiar with the Church's Black Keys, mana-infused swords that are manipulated and transformed to their user's will. They serve as the perfect counter against the immortality of dead apostles, lighting their victims on fire, pinning their shadows in place, and dealing incurable damage. Black keys are also used within baptism rites, incantations that exorcise spirits. Witchcraft and the dark arts also have a long history with the Christian faith. Horrible ordeals like the Salem witch trials had both users of black magic and the innocently accused hunted and murdered by the fearful followers of God. Due to this, very few practitioners remain to this day, but there are some. While not witches, the Isakol family of mages are an old line of dark magic users who have been in decline since the Middle Ages. The family's heir, Selenik Isakol, joined the Yigid Millennia faction to preserve a sense of status, but lost her life through violent greed during the Great Holy Grail War in Trifas. Uniting both the Holy Church and Kabbalah is their mutual worship of angels. As a popular consensus, we think of angels as winged humans who share and spread God's wisdom. Their image harkens back to Nike, the goddess of victory, with many donning the garb and weapons of warriors. In terms of magecraft, angels are often a blanket term for beings of ambiguous magical nature, also described as vessels of power. As a generalized object of worship, mages care less about the religion they derive from, and more how angels can be used to stabilize magecraft in the modern era. In that regard, a mage hardly cares to discern angels from UFOs, so long as they can still be harnessed for spells. Western magecraft is especially interested in this, with angels being just as important as the elements to a mage. Rather, the two are indistinguishable. The lesser pentagram pairs each of the 4 archangels with one of the 4 elements, creating a symbol mages can use in rituals such as banishments. Earlier in this course, I brought up Adra, the Castle of Separation. While technically of a Kabbalistic nature, it makes use of a variety of angels described in Abrahamic faith, including those of the Apocrypha. To an ordinary citizen, statues of angels, wings, and halos hold more of a sentimental value, but to a mage, such worship brings about significant power. Astrology or astromancy is also tied to an angelic motif. Angels are associated with the constellations, and astrology is the pseudoscience of divining meaning from the arrangement of stars and planets in the night sky. Mages have been observing and predicting the stars since the ancient Chaldeans of the 10th century. As such, it occupies an entire department at the clock tower. This is carried on by mages such as Marisbury Animasphere and his daughter Olga Marie, who go on to establish the Chaldea Security Organization, which observes the entirety of human history like a planetarium mapping the stars. Olga carries with her a miniature Chaldeus that projects a model of the Earth's ley lines between symbols of the Greek zodiac. She can draw a magic circle to serve as her orbital plane, and by engraving zodiac signs onto stones, she can cast a variety of spells from blinding lights, barriers, and explosives. Her greatest spell comes from chanting stars, cosmos, gods, animus, antrum, unverse, anima, animasphere to summon a meteor shower above her enemies. Her magic crest is located on her forehead, a representation of the planet Mars. Despite bearing the Animasphere crest, the bulk of the family's magecraft is passed on not just to Olga, but also Kirstaria Wodim. Marisbury had taken the young boy on as his apprentice, teaching even stronger spells than those taught to Olga. Kirstaria learned of using astromancy to take control over the very planets themselves, using them to harness mana on a universal scale. It is an ideal magecraft even older than the Age of Gods that allows the user to turn the solar system into the largest magic circuit humanly possible. Such overwhelming power would bring the entire association to its knees, but because Kirstaria lives in the modern era, he can't actually put this technique into practice, making him solely a genius in theoretical magecraft. Only when Kirstaria finds himself in the distant past can he actually use his ultimate spell, Grand Order Anima Animasphere. It is the same concept employed by Olga, brought about on a colossal scale. He calls meteors to rain from the sky, with enough force to best the god Zeus and his thunderbolts. A less conventional use of astromancy is seen with the spellcaster Pfluger. As an astrologer, he fights using a set of 12 knives, each engraved with a sign of the zodiac. While sharp, these knives are best used for fortune-telling, floating about him in an orbital pattern. In addition to predicting the future, he can channel the knives to alter that future in a limited space. One of the Animosphere branch families, the Fargo, practice astromancy according to the geocentric model, which assumes that the planets revolve around Earth instead of the Sun. The family's heir, Ernest Fargo, once tried to reach the root by breaking tradition and using the heliocentric model. He utilizes a connection between the human body and the planets in the solar system. In terms of Magecraft, this means viewing the sun or heart as the center of the universe, instead of Earth or the soul. Literally using his own body in a magical ritual, Ernest relied on necromancy to become an undead spirit whose hair, bones, legs, soul, heart, head, chest, arms, and pelvis were scattered throughout his mansion in a strategic arrangement. Sadly for him, this ritual failed, in part due to his attempt to break free from family tradition. Even though everyone in the modern era knows that geocentrism isn't at all realistic, the legacy Ernest's family built up by worshipping it wound up having more potential than the actual scientific truth. Thus, rather than ascending Ernest to a state of genuine immortality, the ritual wakes his soul up as a monstrous ghost that tries to absorb the life of his own daughter. If not for that single blunder, he may have succeeded at becoming one with the cosmos. The twin towers of the Iselma family are also built around the idea of astrology. Its residents' daily activities are all meticulously planned to take advantage of the planet's position with the sun. This proves essential in their creation of their ultimate ambition, the princesses of gold and silver. As general as it sounds, it turns out that beauty is another common theme Magecraft is founded upon, and for the Iselma, a branch family of the Valuetta faction, beauty serves as their means of reaching the root. Naturally, beauty can mean many things and is highly subjective. There's beauty from a mathematical sense with the golden ratio, based off the Fibonacci sequence. Worship of its natural beauty can be traced back to Greek and Egyptian architecture. Then we have fashion, the sort of thing that is only considered beautiful by certain people at a given time. Things that are in fashion generally have more value than those that aren't. Some might consider religion a process of finding something beautiful and spreading that value among other people. When it comes to humans specifically, we often try to beautify ourselves through clothing and makeup. Conveniently, the earliest forms of cosmetics can be considered Magecraft. Tens of thousands of years ago, people would decorate their skin to ward off insects, demons, or other spirits that could enter through their face. Some cosmetics, in contrast, were designed to invite spirits or gods. This became tied to beauty when the Egyptian princess Nefertiti used lapis lazuli as an eyeliner, despite it having toxic properties. Certain remarkable individuals, such as Cleopatra, Yang Guife, and Helen of Troy, are worshipped as exceptionally beautiful women, defining the beauty standards of their time. Hoping to channel the value of beauty, the Iselma family has spent generation after generation trying to create the most beautiful person, finally succeeding with their gold and silver princesses, designed from birth to simultaneously embody beauty in every sense of the word. Obviously, something like this is a contradiction, since some beauty standards contradict each other. This means that these princesses embody the very concept of beauty in a transcendent state, and it's through this transcendence that the root becomes attainable. It's based on logic that beauty is infectious. Looking upon something beautiful makes oneself more beautiful. Therefore, by gazing upon the ultimate beauty, a mage may be able to ascend themselves to a higher plane of being. This idea parallels a process of alchemy, where alchemists seek to turn fool's gold into actual gold. In our case, it's a process of trying to elevate a lowly human to a status more akin to a god. Speaking of alchemy, it too is another prominent thaumaturgical system. We've already spoken about its practical use with alchemists at the Atlas Academy, but we haven't done so based on its pseudo-scientific history before it evolved into the chemistry we use today. Alchemy is essentially the manipulation of matter, the flow through which one material becomes another. The Atlas Academy has its own history, but the alchemy most popular in the West, the kind adopted by the Clock Tower, is a product of the Middle Ages and the 16th century studies of Paracelsus von Hohenheim. He combined his knowledge of both magecraft and medicine in an attempt to save lives and improve the quality of life for future generations. By passing mana through different metals or elements, it was possible to reconfigure them into entirely new forms. We call this process transmutation, and it's deeply tied to jewel magecraft, which uses matter to store mana. In a similar fashion, Hohenheim invented the Philosopher's Stone, a crystal made up of condensed mana. These stones could be used as a catalyst for large spells, and even grant a shallow form of immortality. The good doctor was a brilliant philanthropist, but a terrible mage, if only for the fact that he wanted to share the fruits of his labor with the public. He believed his discoveries would help save humanity, to the point where he nearly mass-produced Philosopher's Stones to disperse among the people, along with a formal publication of his studies. This goes without saying, but the Mages Association could not allow that, and Hohenheim was eventually executed in order to preserve the mystery of our craft. Unable to comprehend his selflessness, mages eventually conjured his spirit through seance to hopefully glean even more insight. However, there was no catch. Hohenheim simply wanted the best for children of the future, and he held no deeper secrets or ulterior motives. This established alchemy in the Western world, and for as harmful as it is to expose a mage's secrets, since doing so weakens mystery, the school of practice Hohenheim inspired has ultimately helped more than it's harmed, with alchemy being a solid thaumaturgical system that persists to this day. Hopefully, by now I've given you a glimpse of what thaumaturgical systems exist in the world, and what they're capable of. You may have noticed that I've catered this topic toward mostly Western systems. That is not to say the East lacks its own foundation in magecraft. Far from it, which is why I aim to dedicate our next lesson to the various systems prolific to mages of the Far East. Only after covering thaumaturgical systems on a global scale can I truly conclude today's topic. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all our anime lore, discussions, and Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or a YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like spicy exclusive vids and early access.
As always, celebrate your fandom.
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, The Nonchalant Ostrich, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Lord Omagoden, Freebrick, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Link Pendrago, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Zamas Autonomous, Scout, Yuki Eidos, Crow Kalem, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Meifu Mado, Caitlin P, Sogai CH, Vladimir Ovna, The Taz 96, Jonathan Padua, Kengo X77, Hersha of E-Rated Hands, Alistair Bernadotte, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.